You found the skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on this.
Hey everybody, welcome to Dapper Reacts number, what is this, 86? 89? 89, oh my goodness. Where have all the humans gone? I am here for the second time with Grayson. Grayson, how you doing?
So we found at least one. Thanks for having me back. The part one of this was like a very, very fun time, so I'm happy to be here for part two.
Awesome. I did accidentally unmute you a little bit late, so that's a Dapper as a professional. We'll take a drink for that, so, you know. Don't worry, they didn't miss a single sentence from you. They only missed, like, 2 words. So
I was just saying, we found at least one human at the start of the stream, so we only have, I think, according to Rob's number, around 9.9 million humans left to find this video, so there's about 10 million human fossils that are missing that we have yet to discover even one of.
Well, I guess we're off to a good start. Before we actually get into it, Ben Tectonic B2022, unofficially official, sent in a 20-pound super chat before the show started. So thank you very much. That is very generous. Said,
I love, I gotta say, I just love all the names of the people in your chat, and especially anyone that has like a tunicate, like a little sea squirt in their name. Like, I don't know what compelled you to do that, sir, but hats off to you.
Oh, I mean, I can't compel anyone. This is, they're choosing to do these things.
Oh, I was talking to our tunicate friend.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what compelled him to to pick that username, but it's a hats off for me.
Saw a news story about sculptures of a girl deer made of dill being shown in a student's accommodation. It's called the AIG exhibit. When asked about the name, the AIG said, or sorry, the artist said, it's a dormitory full of dill does. Duh. We will take a drink for that. Thank you very much. I do appreciate that. All right. So, we are here to talk about Robert Carter talking about the fact that there are essentially no humans from parts of the Earth that are generally by creationists considered to be flood rocks. Rocks deposited by Noah's flood. So, now this is weird, right? Because according to young Earth creationists, humans were around before the flood with the dinosaurs and the tectonics and all of the reptiliomorphs and all of these things that, according to, you know, science, are actually various, you know, transitional forms on our way from the life back in, like, the Cambrian or the Ediacaran or whatever, all the way up till now. But for him, these all had to live simultaneously, and they all had to be buried in a single event that somehow didn't capture a single human, even though we know today that floods and tsunamis and the things he's talking about absolutely catch humans, right? Like,
it's basically their conception of the pre-flood world is kind of like the Flintstones, but with more gorgonopsids and carids and all kinds, basically everything that's ever lived on Earth coexisting at once.
Actually, I just finished a video uploading it yesterday, and in it I have an example of what it seems like the ecological zonation Earth must have looked like. And it's basically just a series of terraces that are all walled off by steep cliffs. Because that's the only possible way for this to even remotely work.
That still wouldn't work, because
you're right.
There's a delineation between fossils of micropollen and fossil layers with absolutely no micropollen fossils at all.
And
for that to happen,
the cliffs contain pollen force fields. Don't worry about it.
Because, like, literally on Earth today, like, just by nature of having flowering plants on Earth, you can find pollen at the bottom of the ocean, on Antarctica, in the most barren desert. Like, on every area on Earth, you can find micropollen fossils. And yet, once you get below, like, the, you know, Jurassic period, you don't find pollen. Well, it doesn't make any sense. Ecological zonation ain't gonna help you on that one.
Yeah. We have a few things to read here. Let's see. Asta Lucifer is my headmate. Ryu for $1.99 says, AIG is a bag of something rhyming with Saint Nick. Thank you very much. We'll take a drink for that.
That's a drink.
Actually, someone tagged me in the Saint Nicholas is a Klingon meme that pops around every once in a while, which is this sort of low resolution painting of a picture of a painting of Saint Nicholas of Myra, where like I don't know if it's the lighting or if it's the actual icon itself, but like the skin is darker than you normally see, and he's got lots of like brow wrinkles that kind of look like Klingon ridges, and so I just jumped in there with like, yeah, oh yeah, Saint Nicholas is was an honorable warrior that the humans just co-opted for themselves, and then someone got like angry at me for participating in this silly meme, and I'm like, dude, it's a meme on Twitter. I don't care.
Nobody let the QAnon people know about this because, like, they all think that most politicians and celebrities are replacement clone robot aliens anyway. And if you start telling them that actually Santa Claus is based on Klingons, I mean, that's gonna blow their mind.
Yeah, Klingons were replacing humans way back in the 4th century, apparently.
I mean, it's gonna be earth-shattering for the QAnon people if they ever learn about this.
Let's see. Noram Deputz, who's been a member for 12 months and is at the Tetrapod level, says, Dapper, best dinosaur. Thank you very much. And Rael Gatubello for $2 says, sadly, am not a tunicate. I'm just a jaguar, so feline. Hey, jaguars are cool, even if they don't have bidirectional pulmonary systems, like tunicates. Do you know that? Tunicates make their blood flow one way, and then every once in a while they just reverse the direction of the flow through their veins? Their heart starts beating the other direction?
No, I didn't know that. That's very interesting.
That is a thing that happens.
I think that you'd be very hard-pressed to find any humans on Earth that would find sea squirts cooler than a jaguar, but I'm sure that they're out there.
I don't know that I would find sea squirts cooler than a jaguar, but I do think that both of them are cool. All right.
I agree with
A Savage Cobra, the Ediacaran invertebrate for $1.99 says,
what?
Christmas is much better in the original Klingon. Well, I'll tell you what, maybe if we... how about this? If we get bent a pizza today, in addition to getting a pizza, I will translate and record a Klingon version of The Night Before Christmas, and I will put it up on the channel as a member-only video, and then once Christmas comes around, I will release it publicly, so that everyone can see it. So that's if we can get Bent to get some free pizza, because I think Bent could use some pizza. Alright. Here we go. We're going to dive back in with Rob Carter. He was just telling us about how he doesn't like the float and bloat hypothesis, where the reason that humans weren't preserved is that humans floated on the top of the water because, corpses float. And he was explaining how that's not entirely true for the long run, and that, bodies do sink. And he was talking about a whale fall, which is where a whale falls to the bottom of the ocean after it dies, because, whales die. Where do you think they go? The bottom of the ocean. Otherwise, the ocean would just be a mat of floating whales, which would be gross. Although parts of whales do float. And, in fact, sometimes whole whales will float for a little while, but then, yeah, they do sink.
Being decomposed. Never floated.
Which is interesting too, because we use...
Okay, hold on. He's talking about a whale fall, and he's saying that because it's intact at the bottom of the sea in terms of the skeleton, that it never floated. That does not strictly follow. I agree it's unlikely that it ever floated at the top of the ocean, but it's still not necessarily the case. It could be that it had just enough blubber to float for a little while, and maybe some decay gases also floated it for a little while, and then it sank. I don't think that's what happened. I'm just saying, not impossible. And yes,
here Rob goes again, making uniformitarian assumptions, right?
Right. And yeah, I do know that most whales don't initially float. In fact, what's often happening when things like whale blubber rise to the surface is that that's become disconnected and then floated because the blubber itself is lighter. Some whales do float, though, like right whales, because they have even more blubber than normal. So,
Some people use the bloat and float argument as a reason for why we don't find human fossils. But that should apply to all these other animals.
When I'm drinking hard Baja Blasts today. That's an important thing to point out.
As well.
And it should apply to all the other ones also. Unless humans were buried late in the flood and floated and bloated, and other things that floated and bloated early made us sunk, maybe there's a timing differential. But it just sounds like special pleading to me, so I don't go there.
I actually agree with Robert Carter on this one.
Yeah. I mean, this is beautiful. I mean, I just want to bask in this moment for a while because it's so rare that I see young Earth creationists exercising like this level of critical thinking. Like,
right.
Joel Tay, I'm impressed right here. He was like, this float and bloat hypothesis should not just apply to humans, but every other mammal, every mammal, every animal, right? It's just a special pleading. I'm like, yes, more of this critical thinking. Where has this been for these people's entire careers?
Yeah, apparently, just not that. Well, the thing is, okay, it's not fair to say that they don't do critical thinking, because the thing is, they allow themselves to think critically within the very narrow constraints of their particular theology. So
Yeah.
they're not willing to think critically about their theology or to question that theology overall, but as long as what they consider the most important parts of their theology are able to remain intact, within that, they are perfectly able to like assess different ideas for different amounts of plausibility. So, like, if you look at like the creationist quote unquote literature, right, the stuff that they publish in their fancy blogs, which they call journals, there's a lot of articles going back and forth saying, "Oh, you got this wrong," and you were wrong about the flood boundary for this level or for this reason. And actually, on this show, in an earlier Dapper Reacts episode, I went through both the original Archaeological paper by Gabriella Haynes from AIG, as well as the response from several different creationists who were extremely critical of the paper, and actually had a lot of the same critiques that I had. And in some cases were actually harsher than I was, which I was surprised by. Because I felt like I was pretty mean, but I was reading this response, I was like, damn, guys, that's maybe tone it down a little bit.
I guess, yeah. From the various very intelligent people that I've met in my life, one thing that I have kind of gleaned is that intelligence is compartmentalized, where you kind of it depends on where you point it. You know, you can tune your critical thinking in one specific area, and you can be really, really well thought out and very like analytically rigorous in one particular area, and then just have a complete and utter blind spot elsewhere that you just don't apply that same level of intellectual vigor towards. And I think we all maybe have these, some of us more than others, and
definitely
young
all
Earth
have them.
creationists more than most.
Yeah, we all have them. Although for a lot of people, it's something where it's like, look, you know, when like my my close friends tell me something, I usually just believe them, or something like that. Or you might have a cognitive bias where you're just like, you know, when experts in a certain field tell me something, I tend to just believe them. And in that case, that's one of those ones where it's like, it's not the worst heuristic out there, right? Experts are far more likely to be right than non-experts overall.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. And oh yeah, Alex Marcus says, every extinct soaring animal. Am I a joke to you, Mr. Carter? Yeah, we've pointed that out too, is like, none of the fossil sorting mechanisms that young Earth creationists propose, they work the instant you point out that some animals can fly. Like, that's it. That's all. It's like, hey,
all the way back to the Carboniferous.
right? Like, hey, how come like Meganeura and like Dimorphodon and you know, Quetzalcoatlus, how come they're sorted in different layers? Why is that? Couldn't they all just fly just like all the birds?
Volaticotherium, I think, is that like one that like is kind of like an early it almost like kind of fulfilling the bat niche.
Yeah, wasn't it like a mammaliform or something?
Yeah, it's like not quite a full mammal, but it looks superficially like a bat. I'm like, so how did the bat survive, but those didn't?
Right. Yeah, it never works out for the flying creatures.
So what are some better explanations that we have?
Well, how many do we come up with? We came up with like 5 or 6.
Yes, quite a few.
Wait. And we just I just have to like I love that. Like Joel Tay here is like, so now that we've gone through and we've debunked all of the explanations that other creationists have given that we have shown are logically vacuous, now what are the better explanations? And then Rob just immediately looks down to his notes, like checks notes. How many did we come up with, Joel, at the break room earlier before this video? Like, it's like he doesn't have one to go to. He's just kind of like, what did we come up with, right?
Well, I think part of the problem is I don't think Robert Carter spends time thinking about this problem.
Probably not. I mean, if you're a creationist, you probably like it would be painful for you to spend time thinking about this problem.
Yeah.
Like this would cause cognitive dissonance just to think about.
Yeah, from what I can gather, and this is not necessarily a knock on Robert Carter, right? Because everyone has their own areas that they pay attention to. But he seems to be mostly focused on genetics. He's got, like, I think his YouTube channel is called Biblical Genetics, and he's mostly paying attention to genetics arguments. He's recently come out as saying that he also believes that, what was it? Not Andrew Snelling, what was it? The chimpanzee human chromosome guy.
Yeah,
Can't do math.
Thompson.
Right. that he is also wrong about his analysis of
Yeah.
the human chimpanzee analysis, and he wants to run his own analyses. So like, yeah, I think he focuses on that a lot and not on this. Whereas I think this is more something that like the geologists and the vanishingly few people who think that they're paleontologists in young Earth creationism focus on. 30 to 50 annoying feral peccary newsletters. That's a lot of annoying feral peccaries. Who's been a member
Wow.
for 16 months and is at the annual level says that Godzilla, Mothra, Ghidorah, there are far more planes under the sea than submarines in the sky. Godzilla, Mothra, Ghidorah. Tompkins, that's it, Tompkins. Thank you, Max P. That was
Oh,
it. Jeffrey
yes.
Tompkins. I don't know why I couldn't remember that name. Also, we'll take a drink for all those kaiju emoji, and I really do like the name 30 to 50 annoying feral peccaries. That's good stuff. In part because I like peccaries. Peccaries are cool. People forget that they even exist. I don't.
I like the needles in a haystack argument.
Yes, that's my favorite too. But what's that exactly?
Well, how many humans were alive at the flood?
Well, the Bible says that when God created mankind, created them starting with two, Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
And we know that the flood occurred about 1,600 years later,
Give
plus
or take,
minus
yeah.
a little bit. So we really do not know how many humans were alive at the time of the flood.
No, but the Bible only says that he created two humans. It doesn't say anything about any other species, how many organisms God created.
Okay, so assuming by the time of the flood, we have, even if you're going to be generous, 10 million people alive on Earth at the time.
And I doubt it's that much.
Yeah, I doubt so, because the Bible says that, the Earth was
Genesis,
filled with violence.
yeah, the earth is filled with violence.
Yes.
So, yeah, I don't think there's that many people. Okay.
So is Robert saying that humans were killing each other so much that it was actually lowering their actual evolutionary fitness as a species?
I think he's saying, yeah, there was too much human on human killing for there to be a population of 10 million. I don't really think that there's much of a correlation there. Like, you can have large scale violence at large populations, Rob.
I don't think there's ever been like a verifiable case in which a population of humans has been demonstrably smaller than it could have been based on carrying capacity as a direct result of them just killing each other en masse. Like, I don't think that's a thing. Now you
Usually
might
the
argue,
first
well, like, you might argue that, well, that's because they were worse before the flood, and now that we're the descendants of Noah, we're doing better. Okay, but like, you gotta remember, like, in even a medium term, anything that's actually significantly lowering your just your fitness is probably going to be a bad idea. And this is not necessarily in the sense of like you're going to physically evolve out of this problem in terms of like, the few thousand years, because that's probably not going to happen. But also, like, different cultures can undergo a certain amount of selection, right? Like, cultures that kill themselves off obviously don't persist, whereas cultures that manage to be like minimally pro-social to the point where they're not just rampantly killing each other, but instead are mostly cooperating because humans kind of need that to survive. Those types of cultures tend to, flourish. There's a reason why we don't have a lot of cultures where like murder and betrayal and dishonesty are seen as virtues, and like loyalty and kindness are seen as vices to be avoided. Like, there's a reason that that's not the case. And it's not because we have like morality sent from on high. It's because you can't construct a society that way. It won't work. So like,
I think part of the big issue, right, is that they're just trying to take the Bible so literally that even though no human society has ever existed in actual history with this level of, I mean, you can't construct a society that's just built on violence and, I mean, the way that they have conceived it pre-flood, we know that such a human society would not be feasible at all. So, I mean, God would not even have to send a flood. Like, it would.
Yeah, they wouldn't
The society
persist
would
in
work
that.
itself out if it was truly like that.
Yeah, if it were so violent that it was restricting the population growth, it wouldn't be able to persist. Another
Yeah.
6 Terror who's been a member for 9 months, I can talk, and is at the technical level says, Dapper is not a insert academic field here. Look, I'm not, though. That's the thing, right? I'm I'm someone who likes to dip his toes into a lot of things, and I get at least enough that I can usually talk intelligently with people who know more than me without seeming like an idiot. That's the key.
He's an academic toe dipper.
Yeah. A little bit of sociology, a little bit of linguistics, more than a little bit of vertebrate paleontology, up to maybe my ankles in some geology. Fine.
I mean, I'm the same way myself, Dapper. I'm like, my 3 primary research interests are like biochemistry, neurobiology, and like quantum physics. So
So that third one is pretty out of the. Chesh says Dapper needs more toes. I mean, I have 8. How many more do I need? Do I need 2 more? All right, here we go.
there's
What do you
never
think?
enough toes, to be honest. You could always have 20, 30.
Yeah, I
As
suppose.
long as you have more toes to dip in more fields.
Well, I figure I can just dip the same toe in more than one field.
That's a double dipper. You don't want to be a double dipper.
I mean, if I'm the only one who has to worry about the germs, then I don't care. They're already my germs.
You can't get the linguistic germs into the paleontology germs. It
Sure, I
doesn't
can.
work.
That's when we start talking about when did language evolve.
Well, okay, if you want to mix and match like that, but
Pimplepunk, who half dog, half canine, who's been a member for 15 months and is at the tetrapod level, says, "First, AIG is a bag of dicks emoji. Some of us nerds like to dabble, and I will take a drink for that, and thank you." And yes, it's true, we do. I actually got to use Klingon last night at the Star Trek Adventures game, which, by the way, after this, if you have time, go check that out over on Top Hats Off. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, I got to... Chesh got to use a little bit of Klingon. She broke out her Klingon dictionary. So, yeah. Which, she has a Klingon dictionary.
that was the immediate thing that I was trying to process when you said that.
Chesh has a Klingon dictionary?
Yes.
Yeah. I bullied her into putting it on her Amazon wish list, and then someone actually bought it for her almost immediately.
Nice.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sedimentary rocks in the world.
Yes.
And you ran the calculation. What was the number that you got? Did you get this out of the Creation Answers book?
Yeah, the Creation Answers book, but check it out. We have some, we have the calculations there. So basically, it's saying that if we assume that we have 10 million people at the time of the flood, and we already say that's generous, if we divide that by 700 million cubic kilometers of sediments, that's only 1 human for every 70 cubic kilometers.
That's a
Whoa.
You know, so here's the curious thing, right? If you then want to reverse those numbers and figure out what the total population of all fossil taxa alive were, you run into a problem where, like, that can't possibly be how the sedimentary record works, right? Where we just average out the number of organisms we have, and then we look at the volume that they've been found in, and then we can work backwards to figure out a population, right?
Dapper, they did the volume of the total amount of sedimentary rock in the earth. Like,
Yeah, first,
what?
I don't know of anyone who's ever actually done a study on the total volume of sedimentary rock on Earth, because, like, why would you do that? What possible question could you be answering by finding out the total
one right here.
Right, exactly. This one particular. So first, yeah, I actually don't know that there's any way to verify those numbers, because I can't imagine how they got those numbers. Because there's never been, as far as I can tell, a real study on that. Because again, why would you? It's like when they say, like, oh, 95% of fossils are marine fossils. Like, first, I agree that the vast majority are marine fossils, but no one's done that study. Like, no one sat and counted up the fossils.
Dapper, even if we were to say, okay, this is the exact perfect number, that is the true volume of total sedimentary layers, their conclusion here, like the math they're doing, is still giving you completely useless values. Like, it doesn't matter what the total number of human skeletons are versus the total amount of volume of sedimentary rock. Like, in nobody's model does that number have any significance at all.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. And, like, yeah, the math would then mean, okay, so, Robert Carter, do you really expect me to believe that you think that there were millions upon millions of T-Rexes stomping around the pre-flood Earth? Because, I mean, we have a fair few specimens of Tyrannosaurus Rex. And if we do your same technique, right, where we just take how many we found, and we just try to figure out, like, how many that would correspond to, given that we haven't found any of the humans in this many millions of cubic meters or whatever of sedimentary rock, we could very easily
Dapper,
get into
that
the billions of T-Rexes.
That was actually the exact argument, like the counter argument that I've used in debates when this point is brought up, against Standing for Truth. He brought up this point to me while we were talking about this subject. And I brought up, like, what about the apex predators like T-Rex? Because one of my favorite dinosaurs of all time, no offense to the Ceratosaurs, but literally I was like, how many T-Rex do you think were alive on Earth before the flood? do you think it's more than 10 million? Because we have we have several specimens of T-Rex, some of them remarkably complete, and yet not a single human. So for this type of logic to hold, they would have to think that there's more than 10 million T-Rex alive on the globe before the flood, which, by the way, like, I looked up these numbers for any kind of current estimates for the total number of T-Rex populations on Earth at any one given time, and the current estimate that I saw in the paleontological literature was between 20,000 and 50,000 max.
Yeah, I was gonna say I doubt that it would go beyond like that level of order of magnitude. Like if it got to 100,000, I'd be like, that's a lot of T-Rex. I don't think so.
And so we had multiple specimens of T-Rex and not a single human. So again, that's the major flaw in this that I see is like the species that would have had small populations such as apex predators, and yet we find all these specimens in the fossil record.
Right. I was going to say, well, humans are an apex predator too, but then I realized that according to Carter, they weren't. Because according to Carter, at least, apparently humans were vegetarians. Although this is something that I got confused, right? Because I've heard creationists say that people weren't eating meat before the fall. Or sorry, before the Noah came off the ark. But I've also heard them say that they were ignoring all of God's rules, which seems like it included don't eat meat. So, like, I guess maybe they were. It doesn't matter. Boring Turtle for $2 says, only just arrived and already I'm baffled. Yeah, well, join the club. Then Carnival Frog, who's been a member for 7 months and is at the tetrapod level, says, hooray, catching a live show. Cheers with a Ghidorah, and I will take a drink for that Ghidorah. Thank you very much. And then Carnival Frog gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships, which means I will take 5 more drinks. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right. All right,
before we press play on the video, there's one other point that I want to make on this, because this is like, we finally got to the point where Rob has said, here's the idea that I like and I think is the most logical. And it's like one of the least logical of the ones that they've discussed, that none of them were logical. But like,
yeah, it's really not a good one.
It's really, it's on the same poor quality of as all the other arguments that they've presented earlier. But okay, this is Rob's baby right here. And like, in his own model, right? I don't know if Rob is one of those ecological zonation guys, or if Rob is one of those that, they sorted by density and intelligence and habitat and mobility. Whatever mechanism that Rob thinks that the fossil record is sorted into the order that we find by the flood, whatever mechanism sorts that he thinks, he's not accounting for that at all in this calculation here, because his own model should predict what layers that the humans should be found in based on their density or their habitat or mobility or whatever. They should be able to offer us a prediction, not just say, what about the entire volume of every sedimentary rock layer? They should be able to tell us, well, we know that the flood sorts, carboniferous plants over in the Carboniferous. We know it sorts dinosaurs in the Mesozoic. We know it sorts mammals in the Cenozoic, like all that stuff. They could say, here's how the flood sorts things. So based on that, based on the mechanism we're proposing, here's the layer that our model should predict that the humans should be sorted into. They should be able to do that. And yet...
Mm-hmm. We got a couple things. Pibblepunk, half dog, half canine for $5 says, we already know from their theories about limestone that the pre-flood Earth was a writhing ball of biomass, apparently. Yeah, that's a good point. Weirdly enough, there are too few and also too many fossils for young Earth creationism. Yeah. There are way too few, like, vertebrates and, like, terrestrial animals, because according to them, and humans. But on the other hand, there's way too many things like plankton fossils in biogenic limestone, which is basically just made of plankton fossils. We've got way too many things like mollusks. Like, there's an entire section of the United States where the ground is basically made of mollusk shells from tens of millions of years ago. Where do you fit all of these algae and mollusks all over the place? Like, you can't.
There's literally just not enough surface area on Earth.
Right. The entire Earth would just be covered in, like, meters thick of just writhing, tentacly, sticky biomass.
Which is impossible, because a lot of them are like photosynthesizing, and so can only like be acting as the base of the entire food web in the first couple feet of the ocean before the sunlight becomes too diffuse. Yep. So like there's this very, very finite amount of real estate for all of these phytoplankton to occupy.
Yeah. Let's see. Matthew K., who's been a member for 4 months and is at the tetrapod level, says, Much love from one nerd to another with the live long and prosper hands, and then the horns and a heart. Thank you very much, Matthew K. And then Boring Turtle has just become a member of the channel at the Seropsid level, which is very generous. That is one of the higher tiers. So thank you very much, and everyone, send your tetrapod emojis to welcome Boring Turtle to the memberships. And we are currently 17% of the way to a fancy avatar, which means we're close to 17% of the way to me getting Ben some free pizza and also recording a Christmas Carol in Klingon. So, you can make it happen. All right, here we go.
70 cubic kilometers of rock with one human skeleton in it. Needles in a haystack. We simply might never have found the humans that are buried deep in the fossil record.
That's right. And then, I think most of the fossils were not even, most of the people who died would not even become fossils.
That's the second argument.
That's the second
The
argument.
rarity of fossilization.
Okay, but again, this doesn't work because we have species that were almost certainly rare that we do have fossilized.
Hey, does Rob remember how 2 arguments ago that argument was special pleading? Does he remember that?
No, apparently not. Because the thing is, we're bumping into the problem where he doesn't actually have arguments that, if he does the full critical thinking on, will actually then work for him, which means he has to have this problem, and he doesn't want this problem. He wants it to not be a problem. So he's gonna he's gotta come up with something.
And you could just say, okay, yeah, it's so rare that we would have any human fossils before the flood. But that's why we have all these human and hominid fossils post-flood. We do have hominid fossils. It's not like they're so rare that they would never happen.
Yeah. And these are the people who tell us that fossils almost never form nowadays anymore. It's like, okay, well then what are all these human fossils?
I love also, the creationists say that fossils never form, they're so rare after the flood, and the flood was the only way that you could get all these fossils forming. But except for the human fossils, those only formed post-flood, and none of them formed from the flood.
Right. Which is just like, okay, well, then fossilization is actually extremely common post-flood.
None of it makes any sense.
Yeah, the problem is that it's just like with flat Earth, right? Okay, how do you account for the day-night cycle and the sun and all this? And then it doesn't actually match with how seasons work, especially in the southern hemisphere. So they come up with other explanations for that. But it's like, okay, but that doesn't match your explanation for how the day and the night work. This is a thing that's common across pseudoscience, right?
I think that they know that their audience will accept an answer that vaguely sounds like it could be correct. And as long as their audience doesn't think to ask the follow-up question that they don't have an answer for, or they're just going to move the goalpost again, they know that their audience is never going to engage in that exercise where they continue to ask the follow-up questions. Their audience will take the first answer and be happy with it and think, hey, he's answered it.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. It's common across pseudoscience where you will come up with, okay, you have a problem. Your model doesn't work for this reason. And there will just be a series of ad hoc explanations that are mutually contradictory, but you just don't think of all of them at once, so you don't have to worry about it. And it happens in anti-vax nonsense. It happens in crystal healing or essential oil woo. It happens in conspiracy theories whether or not 9/11 was an inside job, which no, it wasn't. But you get it also in things like flat Earth. You get it in the electric universe. You get it in ancient aliens. You get it in young Earth creationism. The various ad hoc explanations only ever kind of fix one problem, and they break other explanations that are supposed to fix other problems. And the thing is, if you had a real, actual model of how the universe works that was even approaching how the universe works, you wouldn't have this problem, right? Physics isn't chock full from beginning to end of post hoc workarounds that actually break the rest of physics if you were to apply them consistently. It's not how physics works. It's not how biology works. It's not how evolutionary biology works. It's a hallmark of pseudoscience and conspiracy theory. So I'm going to hit play.
Just because you're dead doesn't mean you're going to fossilize. You have to be buried in a rapidly accumulating sedimentary pile.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, you might not fossilize. You can still rot.
Yes. So it's almost impossible to find one.
Then how can we find so many after your fossil-making factory flood? Explain it to me, Robert. That's after
the flood conditions. Just in normal conditions, that's when we start to find the human fossils.
We've got some on screen periodically. We know they exist.
you don't have a lot of humans, you're probably not going to get a human fossil.
Well, we're
Only
back to
several million.
Yeah, we're back to the problem of the T-Rexes, Robert. Do you really think that there were more T-Rexes than there were humans? Is that actually your position? The T-Rexes outnumbered humans.
I think he said that 10 million was probably too high, but like I think he at least thinks there were a couple million humans.
Oh yeah,
which
certainly.
is like so many more times larger than the population of T-Rex could have ever been on Earth. Like if he's actually proposing like, oh, like, everything was really nice before the flood. Maybe there were 10 million T-Rex. I'm like, follow that through. Like, try to figure out what kind of biomass would be required per square kilometer to support a population of 10 million T-Rex on Earth. It doesn't work.
Yeah, and the thing is, you can't just do just the raw biomass, because part of it is like T-Rex can't support itself on like termites, right? It's going to have to hunt reasonably sized prey to fill itself up, which themselves then have to be supported by their own whole food web. So like, it's more than you think, right? Because you might think, oh, well, it would take this many pounds of meat to feed a T-Rex, so that's how much biomass I have. Well, that's easy to get. Well, that's not how you do the calculation, though. Because first you have to calculate...
I was talking about the calculation where you would calculate the amount of, basically, like, you have to go through each step and multiply by 10 for like the energy inefficiencies at each step of the food chain, and then just calculate the total amount of biomass needed to support a T-Rex's diet, you know?
Yeah.
And it would just be, the Earth could not support that much.
Vadim Radchenko says, didn't dinosaurs actually outnumber humans? Dinosaurs lasted not longer. I mean, if you want to add up every single dinosaur of any species that has ever existed, then they by far outnumber humans. They still outnumber humans. There are more chickens alive today than there are humans alive today.
The issue is, like, when you look at how long of a period in the consensus model that dinosaurs and specifically T-Rex existed on Earth, yes, there's many millions of T-Rex over that huge amount of geological time. But we're talking about at any one given time, and we're talking about the flood model, in which you don't have dinosaurs existing on the world, in the Earth, for millions of years. They exist for the same number of years as the humans at presumably each species, like T-Rex. I mean, we're not talking about all dinosaurs here. We're talking about specific species. And those population numbers are not going to be comparable to a human civilization.
Yeah. That's always why it's always a little bit weird to me when someone says, well, there's more ants than humans. It's like, well, okay, but ants are like an entire like family of insects.
Yeah.
Are there more ants, or are there more ants that are like this one species of carpenter ant or humans? That's a fair comparison. So let's see, we got a few things here. Pibblepunk, half dog, half canine says for $5, it's kind of hard to keep the faith once you notice its defenders playing Calvin ball the way these guys do. That's certainly been something that I've heard from a lot of people who've left Christianity as part of their leaving young earth creationism. Yeah. Ray Gatubella for $2 says, I don't know what language this is. I'm not even going to try to butcher it. I guess I'll try. Genesis Ibag I don't know. Is that like Indonesian? I have no clue. But that's for $2.
I would take a guess.
But I will take a drink for it because I'm pretty sure I know what it means. So, cheers. Savage Cobra, the Ediacaran vertebrate for $4.99 says T-Rex must have been a filter feeder before the fall. Of course. Yes, those widely spaced, large serrated teeth are perfect for straining water. And then
it was feeding upon krill during the flood like a whale.
Yes. Although actually, I think T-Rex probably was a reasonably strong swimmer.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got very big legs.
They depicted it in the new Apple TV version of their like dinosaur documentary they did. They had a T-Rex swimming.
Prixie, are you registered to vote? Check now. Purple for $5 says this stream is a bright light on a rough day. Thank you for being here. Also, AIG is a bag of we've got lollipops. I know what that means. Also, go to vote.gov. Also, pizza for Bent. Thank you very much. We are we're not 21% of the way there. We are like closer to 20% of the way to pizza. But also, yes, do in fact go check whether or not you're registered to vote. I've checked twice now. And I am expecting my ballot in the mail sometime in the next, I think, like 3 weeks or so. Because I'm also on the active early voter registry. So
I didn't realize that non-humans were permitted to vote, especially in red states.
Where in the Constitution does it say that dinosaurs can't vote?
You got me there. I'm no constitutional
Yeah.
scholar. You're a sovereign dinosaur.
Also, Asa Lucifer is my head mate Ryu for 49 and says almost. NG and MGA are pronounced Nung and Munga or something. Historical spelling go burr. Oh, well, yeah, there was no way I was ever going to get that since I still don't actually know what the language was. Oh, Tagalog?
Is it like a Southeast Asian language or
It
something?
was Tagalog.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't know, like, I think lumpia is Tagalog for, like, egg roll.
Yeah.
That's about
Lumpia's
all
great.
It
Delicious.
is. Look, I really like Filipino food. I thought I didn't
Oh, yeah.
because my first introduction to Filipino food was in the galley in a U.S. Navy vessel, which was not a great way to be introduced to it. And so for a while, I just didn't bother. And then one day, I was like, you know what? Everything else that the Navy fed me sucked compared to the real version. I bet I'm not being fair to the Filipinos out there. So I went to a Filipino restaurant. I was like, this is actually really good. All right, sorry, Filipinos everywhere. My bad. It was the Navy. I blame the Navy. It's really true though, because like, oh man, everything they fed me, and that was the first time I'd ever heard of like lumpia or pensit or anything, and I was like, this stuff is terrible.
I just saw a video of a soldier explaining an aircraft carrier to someone that never heard of it before, and was just like, and you're like, wow, like it's like what can this thing do? It's like topple entire nations single handedly. It's like, wow, so like that has to be a huge crew. It's like thousands of people, all 18 to 25-year-old functioning alcoholics, and we taught some of them how to make Starbucks. And it's like,
These are these are all roughly accurate things.
Yeah.
Some people there are older, but they're usually like, you know, like the upper brass of the aircraft carrier. So, all right, here we go.
That's the basic argument.
So this goes to the next explanation, late stage of death. So what's that?
Given
That like late stage capitalism? I've actually very rarely heard anyone define late stage capitalism in a coherent way.
I would be curious about what kind of economic system that the creationists think happened before the flood, you know?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't think they ever talk about it. To be fair, I don't know how it would, what kind of economy they had would affect anything else that happens in the Bible. So I guess I get why they don't bother.
I just like it from like as someone that was not raised Christian, like I was not raised in this stuff believing that it was true. I've always kind of been attracted to the pre-flood period in the kind of way that I'm attracted to like the Silmarillion, like the Lord of the Rings, of like it's like the story before the story that you don't quite have enough information, so your creativity can run wild with it. And I always wanted to know, like, you know, I wish that somebody would make like a gladiator movie, but like pre-flood, like in the some sort of pre-flood, you know, fallen
like that
world
diorama at the Creation Museum where there's a giant in a gladiatorial arena fighting a Carnotaurus.
Dude, come on. You cannot tell me that would not be great. If like Peter Jackson did it, like Lord of the Rings, but like the pre-flood world, like that would actually be a really good fantasy like movie that I would want to watch.
Yeah, I can see that being fun. All right, here we go.
a flood scenario where we have lots of sedimentary rocks forming.
Yes.
Later on in the flood, it's possible that the rate of rock formation slowed down.
Okay. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna take a drink. This is dumb. We got to talk about this. Okay. As a general rule, the higher up you are in the stratigraphic column for sedimentary rocks, the easier it is to find those rocks. Down in the Ediacaran or like earlier, it's virtually impossible to find any. Cambrian
Is that just
rocks,
because of this weird? It's pretty obscure. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, Dapper. This thing called erosion.
Yeah, it is actually. As it turns out,
Weird.
the longer
What obscure trivia there?
Yeah, the longer rocks have existed, the more time they've had to erode away, and so the less of that rock we have. And so this is a consistent thing. And so any idea in which newer rocks are rarer than later rocks is directly contradicted by just going and seeing what rocks are around. That's all it takes. That entire idea is just the actual inverse of how reality works. So, yeah.
Well, okay,
So
we could
if
not
humans
have
make-
expected for AIG to hire people to do this episode who
CMI.
actually had experience looking at rock layers. Come on, that's
Pretty
You
sure
can't
this.
expect everything.
Pretty sure this is CMI, not AIG.
I don't think it ultimately matters to the sentence I
No,
say.
that's true. It doesn't. But we do want to get it right because look,
Yes.
unlike AIG, CMI doesn't have any demon-possessed witch necrophiliac secretaries.
Okay, a meaningful difference. I
Right.
will retract my statement. I already forgot which of the two that this one was, but I'm sure that there's a meaningful enough difference that it is significant, and I apologize to whichever one of the two I offended.
Yeah, this is the one who did not have a secretary who was a witch that was possessed by a demon who was allegedly performing unspeakable acts on corpses.
So this is the not fun one.
Yes, if you want to put it that way. All right, Star Song in yet another language that I don't recognize, although it could be. I don't know. Komostaka Magandang Gabi. How are you doing? Good evening. Oh, I'm doing all right. I am having a good time today. We did a good episode of my Star Trek TTRPG actual play last night. I'm hanging out with you guys, Grayson. We got 105 people watching and only 66 likes. Hit that like button, everybody. But yeah, I'm doing all right. And then after this, I'm going to be over on Chesh's channel. So it's a pretty good day so far. Ardor Ams, who's been a member for 14 months and is at the annual level, says, how do creationists explain fossils of microbial mats and Ediacaran biota, forms of life which cannot coexist with modern animals, burrowing worms? They just say that they were deep-sea organisms and then just pretend that makes sense, even though they generally can't be if they're microbial mats in the sense of photosynthetics. Although some Ediacaran microbial mats weren't. They were just decomposers. But they also they don't bother to explain how ecological zonation works with things like stromatolites. Because according to them, stromatolites being the earliest things in the fossil record should be deep sea organisms, according to ecological zonation, even though they can't live in the deep sea because they photosynthesize. Right. There's no explanation as to why worms. There's actually just no explanation as to how these ecological zones remain so tightly stratified. Like, what prevents a penis worm for just burrowing down into the Ediacaran layer where it has free reign to eat just about anything down there and disrupt the mats? And it just doesn't work. And they just don't bother.
Ichnofossils, you have a distinct order of fossilized footprints in these layers. You don't find any mammal footprints at the layers below the Mesozoic. I don't know. The ignofossil thing, the only explanation I've ever heard even them attempt is some sort of insane world where the floodwaters recede and then one specific population of animals walks across it and then another flood comes in and lays down another layer and then a different population of animals walks across it and then another layer and of
course the problem is that unless those footprints dry out and at least partially lithified between those periods, you're not going to get them preserved, and there isn't enough time for that because it takes a lot longer than a few weeks, which is the maximum time they give for any of these events.
In my head, whenever I imagine this model of flood in, footprints, flood out, and all this going on, in my head, I'm imagining it to the yakety yak theme music of just yes. They're just running across, and the floodwater chases them, then another one runs across, and more floodwaters.
Heather Schrodinger's Fossil Coon for $5 says, obviously no human fossils were formed until humans started burying their dead post-flood with an eggplant emoji. Yes, of course, that explains all of it. And then Fearmonger, Master of Science, is for $4.20. Hey, blaze it if you got it. Says, Jagska fortsätta tills du lära dig svenska? No, I don't speak any Swedish. No.
Quick, somebody sent him a message in Occitan or something.
I could probably at least understand that one. I've occasionally managed to read Occitan. I'll take a drink though.
The most obscure language that you could possibly find. Just send Dapper messages in that.
Yeah, go for it. Philipunk, half dog, half canine for $2 says those hydrothermal stromatolites, don't you know? Oh, obviously. Yes, how could I have been so foolish as to forget about the hydrothermal stromatolites? What an idiot I am.
Those are the fountain of the deep stromatolites.
Ah, yes, of course. And then Savage Cobra, the Ediacaran vertebrate for $4.99 says, remember dinosaurs only lay eggs in lines when they're running away from a global flood? Oh yeah, that was a Carl Boss special. he found this dinosaur nest with eggs in pairs in a line, and his explanation was that the dinosaur was laying the eggs in a row as it was running from the floodwaters. And I was just like, oh my god. Someone laid them in neat 2x2 rows. Okay.
Oh my god.
Sure.
Every time I think that like I've heard it all, some creationist at some dark recesses of the internet says something that it just takes it to a whole new level.
Yeah, it's nearly incomprehensible how dumb the explanations for flood geology and how it interacts with the fossil record are. And I mean, these are things that, like, I don't even think, like, your average 9-year-old would be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. They'd be like,
yeah,
huh? What? That doesn't, I don't get it. Like, yeah, no, you shouldn't get it. It doesn't make any sense.
I imagine, like, a 9-year-old, like, hearing all of this and just going, okay, and then just, like, going back out to play. Like,
yeah, I was a weirdo because I was paying attention to stuff like this when I was a young Earth creationist little kid.
Yeah, I cannot relate, and my condolences for anyone that has to go through that, man.
Yeah.
We lived at higher elevation in the first place, or if they're buried later, or they died later in the flood. Maybe they died during a time when there wasn't a lot of rock being manufactured, therefore their bodies wouldn't be able to be trapped in the rocks.
Okay.
I don't really believe that.
Well, that's good, because it doesn't make any sense at all.
Boundary.
Yes.
30 to 50 annoying feral peccaries newsletters says, Dapper and Vishanti or Murphy, Baby It's Cold Outside duet in Klingon when with the Ghidorah. We'll take a drink for the Ghidorah.
Rob is my favorite, man. He's the coolest. Like, he literally... I
have to answer the question. Hold on, before we go on to Rob. Tell you what. That'll be something that I can talk to with Vishanti or with Chesh. But if we can't even get Christmas Carol, or sorry, The Night Before Christmas in Klingon, probably going to be a while till we get Baby It's Cold Outside. So go on about Rob. Sorry about that.
No, I just got too worked up because, like, I just was reminded that Rob was prompted to start talking about this because Joel Tay said, so what are the actual good explanations that we do have for the missing human fossils? That was the answer. That was what was the prompt. And in response to this, Rob goes off on this. It says at the end of it, no, I actually don't believe anything I just said. Like, it's like, what?
Then these were your good ones?
Yeah, like, these would not be the good explanations. Like, this is just the same, like, as the previous ones that they started by debunking them all. Like, this is the same kind of explanation that they literally are debunking it, but passing it off as if it's an example of one of the good answers.
Yeah. Pillpunk, half dog, half canine, for $2 says, the eggs are laying 2x2, hurrah, hurrah. Which, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I know a lot of people at CMI are leaning toward a high
I'm starting
high in the Cenozoic. I mean, Tim Clary at ICR is doing some phenomenal work in that and really...
So, in case any of you don't know, the last 2 videos that I uploaded for early access were about Tim Clary talking about the fossil record. It's not what I would call phenomenal work. Yeah, this is the man who thinks that naming the Cretaceous and the Paleogene different things, like giving them different names on account of the different fossils found in them, is circular reasoning. And if you can explain to me what in the world is circular about naming 2 different things with different properties, with different names, I will give you at least 4 internets, because I can't figure it out. Timothy Clary seems like he might actually be legitimately stupid.
Wait, you're saying that calling different things by different names is circular reasoning?
If they have different properties, apparently.
Oh, okay. Well, if they had the same properties, then it wouldn't be. That makes sense.
Obviously, yeah. That's why I individually name every single one of my ice cubes.
Different things having different properties should have the same name.
Yeah, obviously.
That just makes sense.
Yeah, but if they have the same properties, then they each get individualized names. Yeah.
Great work, Larry.
Look, Rob Carter, if you ever watch this, but there's a chance you will, because sometimes you watch things when I respond to you. I would love it if you would explain to me what you think is great about the work of Timothy Clary, and be specific, right? Like, pick an actual particular thing that he's worked on and a conclusion he's drawn, and tell me what about that you think is great. Because I'm honestly baffled as to what anyone would think is great coming from Timothy Clary. But hey,
Pushing me in this direction.
Mm-hmm.
I used to think of the KT or the
Yes.
KPG, where the dinosaurs died out. That's the
Sable Eagle says, Dapper, it's not an obscure language spoken by 98 million people. I'm assuming we're talking of Swedish. Look, I don't think that Swedish is an obscure language, or Tagalog, but that doesn't mean that I speak them. Right? There's very little correlation between how many other people speak a language and whether or not I speak it. Because one of my best languages is Klingon. Like, let that sink in. Right? Like, it goes like Klingon, French, Spanish, and then, I don't know, a mess of other things that just kind of hang out somewhere at the bottom. But, like, there's no correlation, right? Like, my Japanese is better than my Swedish. Pretty sure there's more people speaking Swedish. I don't actually know that for certain, though. So, like, yeah. Stable Eagle sends something in, like, Vietnamese. Look, if you want me to try to struggle through Vietnamese, you're gonna have to pay me to do it. I'm not doing it for free. That's just not gonna happen. It's Vietnamese. Vietnamese is one of those languages that wants to trick you. Because it's, like, written with, like, a modified version of the Latin alphabet, but, like, no, it does not look like how you think it sounds. Or it doesn't sound like how you think it sounds. Like, Nope. So yeah, if you want me to try to struggle through some language that I don't speak, you're gonna have to pay me. I'm not gonna do it just because you tagged me.
end of the flood, because there's this nice break between types of fossils and other types of fossils. Yeah, I don't hold to that anymore.
Yes.
Oh.
But if the flood is in the late Cenozoic,
What explains the break in the fossils then, Rob?
I think that he's saying that that's the work that he thinks Cleary is doing. That
He's explaining why
good work is that he's saying that the flood boundary was not in the KT boundary, that it was above that, and that's what Rob I think is what Rob is saying is the good work that he's done, and that has actually convinced Rob that the KT boundary is not the flood boundary.
Okay. But I would be curious then to know what explains the iridium layer and the almost instantaneous turnover in faunal assemblages right at that layer.
There was one tidal wave in the flood that was highly irradiated with iridium.
Darklaw Dragon has been a member for 26 months at the tetrapod level and sends a membership milestone chat with no message. Well, thank you for being such a loyal supporter, Darklaw Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
that means there's a massive amount of rocks being formed in the Cenozoic in the flood.
Okay.
So I can't.
Isn't that where you should be finding the humans, according to you? Because, like, they live in upland areas or something? Like, whatever.
Can't go with the maybe humans died later when there's less rock formation. No, still lots of rock formation in the end stages.
Okay. So even if humans did,
He just debunked his whole point right there, right?
Yeah, so far the only thing that Robert Carter has not bothered to debunk is just there's a lot of total volume of sedimentary rocks, which is a dumb argument for two different reasons. The big one being that, that would imply that there are just millions and millions of species that should not be outnumbering humans in any kind of ecology. And then also, it ignores the fact that it's special pleading because we have explanations as to why certain fossils wind up in certain places. And no creationist thinks that all fossils should be, like, equiprobably distributed across the entire sedimentary volume of rock. That's not what they think. Because it's obviously not true, so they have to account for that. So why doesn't that apply to humans? Why do we suddenly get to use the entire volume of sedimentary rocks? That doesn't... But we did just have... We did just have a big jump all the way to 43% as Star Song and Savage Cobra each gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take 5 drinks. We're going to go on a quick break so I can get another drink. Because this will be me running out of drink. And then we'll drink the other 5 drinks, and then I'll give my quick post-break thing and jump right back into it. So here's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we will be right back after this quick musical interlude, hopefully, if you can hear it. Hey everybody, we are back. So the first thing we gotta do is we gotta take 5 drinks for the gifted memberships from Savage Cobra, the Ecological and Vertebrate. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm gonna give the quick after the break talk. Then we got a few more drinks to take, so buckle up. Alright, so first of all, I want to say thank you so much for everyone who's watching, everyone who's supporting. It really does mean the world to me. You guys are the ones who can make it so that I can afford to just keep cranking out videos, putting out new videos in early access, still months ahead, even with this being a slow month, because I took a vacation. And so if you are currently not helping out in the financial department, but you can afford to, and you're interested in doing so, there's a number of great ways. Probably the best one is the Patreon. It's where I get to keep the most of the money. But there's also channel memberships. Patreon starts at $1 a month. The membership starts at $1.99 a month. On the Patreon, you can also get a 15% discount if you pledge annually instead of monthly. Either way, they both give you access to my super secret Discord server that's just for supporters. That's so secret, I mention it several times a week. But that's a great place. It's only for people who are supporting or who recently were supporting. I do give like a 2-week grace period after your support, financial support ends, so you can renew it or just say goodbye or whatever. So there is that. Also, you get early access to my scripted videos, like I said, many months ahead. I think I'm currently somewhere around 5-ish months ahead. So yeah, stuff that you see now won't be coming out until like early next year in terms of like for the public. So yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's also more perks at higher tiers. You can go all the way up to $100 a month on the Patreon, and up to like 20, I think, or $19.99 on the memberships. So there's that. Also, if a monthly or annual pledge isn't your thing, there's also a merch store. There's also an Amazon wish list, both linked in the description. You can get yourself some merch. That'll get me a little bit of money from that. Also, you can just show your support for the channel that way publicly, you know, or just at home with a coffee mug or a blanket or something. There's also, like I said, the Amazon wish list is full of mostly books that I want. Most of them are just for fun. So yeah, there's some comic books, there's some tabletop RPG books, there's also some snacks. So, you know, there's some stuff there. And if none of that is something that you care to do or want to do, that's fine. Absolutely. What I would ask everyone to do is like this video, watch a few of my videos in a row, share some of my videos with your friends. But also, Pillowpunk, half dog, half canine, gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships, so we have to take 5 more drinks. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, I know so a whole bunch of people have been given memberships, and one person joined of their own accord. If you are not if you're not currently already in that Discord, what you want to do to get access to it is go to Discord, go to settings, go to connections, add the YouTube account that you got the membership with, and then if you scroll to the bottom of the connections, it should give you a list of servers you're allowed to join as a result of that connection. There's one that's going to be labeled Dapper Dinosaur. Hit the join button on that one, and you will be added. I do not give out join links for it, though. So if you ask me for a join link, I will not give you one. I also won't give you one if you don't ask. So, you know. And then Savage Cobra, the Ecological Vertebrate for $5 says, Clary's, quote, good work on the flood boundary is as impressive as pack-led engineering. Actually, I don't know. Have you seen Lower Decks? Because it turns out, pack-led engineering, it might be very, very derivative, but it can be dangerous. Oh, made a mistake there, so we'll get one drink for me making a Dapper's Professional. But then, Fade to Gray, Justice for Elhanan. Yes, Justice for Elhanan. The OG Goliath Slayer, thank you very much, David, gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships, which means we take 5 more drinks. I'm going to have to get myself a 3rd drink at this rate.
Wow.
Oh man, I'm going to be out of it for the show with Chesh. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Which also puts us 58% of the way to a fancy avatar. All right, here we go.
Run to higher ground, and they're rapidly buried in those higher layers. We wouldn't expect to find the fossils, because what happens when the flood subsides?
The last things that are laid down are the first things to be eroded.
So that means the top layers
Top
will be
layers
eroded away.
get
Remember, this would mean that we would have more abundant strata from sedimentary rocks the lower we go in the stratigraphic column. But that's the opposite of what happens. By far, the most common sedimentary rocks are like early Holocene.
Yeah, and again, we still do have human fossils in the Cenozoic rocks. I mean, and here's the real rub, though, is like they're only focusing on human skeletons, but there are many, many other signs of human civilization that are not just fossils. Like, you have all of our technology, they're not finding any tools in any of these layers either. You have, like, in actual environments where humans coexisted with large animals, you can often find signs of humans hunting those animals. Like, you actually find, like, on their bones, you will find markings from human tools. Guess what we never find on Mesozoic fossils? Tool marks, tools, any signs of civilization, any archaeological remains from any kind of building or technology or anything that would be a hallmark of humans. Like, the humans, you're saying, oh, well, they were the last to die because they were intelligent and they just, like, went to high ground and avoided the floodwaters or whatever. It's like, are they bringing all of their stuff with them?
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
30 to 50 Annoying Feral Peccaries newsletter says, I forgot about the pending show with Chesh. Tell me/us more. So this is called The Unnamed Tavern. Myself, Landon Knoll, Chesh, and Manya. Only one of us is someone with a actual Wikipedia entry, and that's Landon, by the way. We gather together to talk about random various news things. So a lot of it ends up being a somewhat US-centric, just because, you know, half the panel is American, but also, you know, we have an Indian immigrant to New Zealand and a Canadian, so we have a fair bit of world news from all over the place. And yeah, we just chat about what we think about those news stories, and then also sometimes we have a lightning round where Chesh gives us surprise stories to talk about, and we have to, like, read through like just a little tiny bit of an article and then give a take. And those takes are usually kind of hot because we haven't had time to think about it much. So yeah, that's going to be about an hour after the show normally ends. So, like, I think it's going to be sometime around 3 p.m. Eastern, but double check on her channel because I don't want to lie to you. I will show up basically when Chesh sends me the link.
4 p.m. Eastern.
Was it?
It's already 4 p.m. Eastern right now.
Oh, I meant Pacific. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I meant Pacific.
I was like, did you miss the Chesh's show? Because it sounds fun.
No. If I were missing Chesh's show, she would be letting me know right now. I would not be able to be unaware of it. Chesh is a goblin. Is she from the Underdark? That is a question you would have to ask her. So I would encourage you to go watch the show so you can ask her that question yourself. Because I don't want to lie accidentally. I guess you can't lie accidentally. I don't want to steer you wrong about whether or not Chesh is from the Underdark.
You can't dox what kind of goblin Chesh is.
I mean, that, again, is up. I think she's a trash goblin, actually, which I think is public. Pretty sure.
Okay. Public information, she's a trash goblin. Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that she's publicly said that she's a trash goblin. So
I wrote it first. I heard a very interesting talk at the last International Conference of Creationism.
Yes.
And the speaker was saying some controversial things that made some people a little uncomfortable.
I was just going to say, the phrase, I heard a very interesting talk at the last International Conference on Creationism, is a sentence that I don't know that anyone could ever say that honestly. But you know what? Whatever.
Wait. I love the entire sentence. You got to finish that. And the speaker was saying some things that were making us pretty uncomfortable.
Well, yeah, okay. That I'll believe. I will believe that. Because it's actually pretty easy to make creationists feel uncomfortable.
Do you have any guess as to which speaker he'd be talking about just based on the information he's given so far? Like, who's giving a talk at CMI that's making everybody in the audience uncomfortable?
Todd Wood, maybe Kurt Wise, maybe Marcus Ross.
Let's see if he says who it is.
Yeah.
But one of the things he said was, what flood post-flood boundary? Mm-hmm. It's been eroded.
The one where you have flood rocks below it consistently, and then above it you have post-flood rocks. That's it. That's which one?
Eroded.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been eroded, he said. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's been eroded. You still have the highest known flood rocks, which are going to be below the lowest known post-flood rocks, and you have to figure out where that is, because here's the thing, right? if there's a break in the continuity of the geologic column, stratigraphic column, between rocks laid down by a global violent 1-year flood versus those laid down by what are more or less uniformitarian processes, that's going to be a big deal, and it should be extremely glaringly obvious that there is such a huge difference in the method of deposition between these rocks.
If
The fact that there's
what I am-
argument... Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying, if what I'm hearing Rob say is correct, he's saying that there are no layers that were not laid down by the flood. He's saying that there are no layers that were laid down by uniformitarian processes. If
Well,
that's what I'm hearing.
You can't believe that then, because then he would have to say that all the human fossils we have are in fact flood rock.
I
but
think
he doesn't.
that's where he might be going with this. He's saying that
Okay.
if the flood boundary is above where he's saying it's above the Cenozoic and it was already eroded. So that would to me imply that every layer is a flood layer.
I mean,
that's what I think he's going.
We have like areas right now today where like you can transition from mostly lithified to still being deposited sediment. But okay, sure, Rob.
I think that's what he's saying anyway. If I'm incorrect, but I think that is what he's implying here.
Maybe. Obstinate Sparrow says, shouldn't the flood boundary be glaringly obvious? Yes, it should.
Yeah.
It should be the most conspicuous aspect of the geological record of Earth.
I mean,
Like,
if you
by a
think
lot.
about it, it should be so glaringly obvious that because we haven't found it, Rob is saying it's already have to be eroded away. Because he knows it should be so obvious.
The thing is, that doesn't help him unless he thinks that there are literally no post-flood rocks. That's the only way that could possibly help him.
Let's see if he goes that far.
All right, I don't think he will, but maybe he will. If he does, we'll drink for a confirmed prediction.
To explain that, I mean, I understand that, but for our viewers,
After the flood is over, rocks are not deposited anymore. The water subsides. And the
Take a drink for no rocks are deposited after the flood. That is
Okay,
such a
no more
stupid
rocks,
take.
guys. No more rocks.
We're done with rocks. We don't need any more rocks. We're full up on rocks, guys. Come on. We got too many.
Yeah, I mean,
Pibblepunk half dog half canine for $5
what are we doing
says
here, Dapper? What are we doing?
we're reading
no
super
more
chats,
rocks.
Jason. We're reading super chats.
No more rocks.
So if they're gonna start saying there's no flood boundary remaining, where are they getting their alleged post-flood fossils from? Yeah, that's the question. I don't know. I think like Grayson has suggested that maybe they're going with all of the fossils are actually flood fossils. Now, how that corresponds with the fact that we find a lot of hominin fossils in places like caves that are still caves that couldn't have been filled with flood sediments because we don't find the bones encased in sediment. Like, yeah, I don't know how we're going to figure out how that works, right? Because we have a lot of places where there are hominin fossils just in a cave that aren't buried or are very minimally buried. So, like, your guess is as good as mine as to how that works, because that's always been what I've
Those
heard.
would all have to be Noah's descendants of some kind.
Well, then they
right?
are post-flood fossils then, though, because that's the thing. If that means that, like, Homo naledi, Homo neanderthalensis, Homo
Yeah.
frisiensis, those have to
Yeah.
be post-flood in that case.
Yeah.
Most of
I
Homo
think that-
erectus...
I think that's what they're saying. I think that those are like. I think that would have to be what they're saying is that Noah's
Okay.
descendants mutated into tiny little hobbits and Homo naledi and went into caves
Okay.
and died.
I have legitimately heard creationists argue that Noah was a Homo habilis.
Yeah, I've heard that Adam and Eve were Homo habilis as well.
Yeah. So, like, okay, sure.
I've even heard Adam and Eve were Homo habilis and Noah was Homo erectus.
That makes no sense at all.
Yeah. And I don't know where the Neanderthals fit into all this. Maybe
Obviously,
they're the
they're post-flood descendants of Noah, even though was it Nathaniel Jeanson won't put Neanderthal DNA sequences into his analysis because
Yeah.
they break his analysis and push mitochondrial E for Noah's descendants. Or no, sorry, Y chromosome, quote unquote, Noah, like an order of magnitude back from his 6,000 year number that he likes to use.
Have you heard his explanation for why he won't include them?
Yeah, he says he doesn't think that they're reliable.
Yeah.
But the problem is,
Ask that to the fucking Nobel committee that gave
Right.
the Nobel Prize to Svante
and part of
Peters.
the problem is, if they were unreliable, then we wouldn't actually be able to reconstruct like a genome because
Yeah.
they would be too degraded to actually be able to put into a sequence where we can determine what goes where in a chromosome. And yet we can with a reasonably high degree of accuracy and confidence, which means they're not too degraded. Anyway,
Yeah, like-
boring turtle for $5.
Svante Pablo literally won the Nobel Prize for doing just that.
Boring Turtle for $5 says, more importantly, how can there be no more rocks? Does he know anything about sedimentary deposition? What part isn't happening exactly? Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, we know of places where sediments are forming, right? Like, you can just go there. Like, you ever been to the Gulf of Mexico? A lot of sediment is flowing into the Gulf of Mexico. Less than used to, ever since the Colorado River stopped actually getting to the Gulf of Mexico. Or no, it was going to the Gulf of California, so never mind about that one. But still, yeah, like, there's a lot of sediment deposition going on right now. There's lithification going on right now. You can dig up rocks that are forming, that have formed recently. Yeah, it's... I don't know. And also this... I mean, there have to, at the very least, be post-flood, like, ash falls, right? Because we know of post-flood volcanic eruptions. Or, well, volcanic eruptions in historical times, which formed rocks, which he would say are post-flood. Obviously, there was no flood, so saying post-flood rocks doesn't actually make any sense. But, like, we know of volcanic eruptions that resulted in, like, subaerial tuff deposits that are rock. So.
They really don't want to talk about, like, igneous layers at all. Because
no, they really don't.
That's going to ruin the entire flood model, if they do.
Mapleson, who's been a member for 2 months, says Jesus should have been a Neanderthal at this rate. I
think Jesus should be Homo floresiensis.
This little tiny guy?
Tiny guy.
How do you get to, like, Judea from Flores?
You know what? The same way that all the creatures got to the Ark from Australia.
Okay. So he was launched by a volcano. I've heard that as an actual argument. Suborbital volcano launches to get the kangaroos to Australia.
Oh, God.
Because, you know, the Middle East is renowned for all of its active volcanoes.
I mean, at this point, just say that the eagles from Lord of the Rings flew them there.
Right.
First thing that happens is massive amounts of erosion happen to the entire Earth's surface that's exposed to the atmosphere.
Yes.
And so whatever is deposited last is being heavily eroded.
So you're actually saying that the flood boundary
Doesn't really exist.
Doesn't really exist. So what we have is...
Even if that were true, it still wouldn't make sense. There would still be a flood boundary.
early flood and post-flood.
Yeah.
But not so much the late flood.
What about the middle flood?
What?
So
wait a minute. Okay, wait. Okay, I think I misunderstood this. So they're saying that, yeah, only the late flood layers, the post-flood layers are still existing, I guess, and only the late flood all eroded, and then all we have is the early flood layers.
I guess. Although, that erosion doesn't mean it disappears. That means that it went somewhere. Where is it? Is it at the bottom of the ocean? I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of the late flood stuff will be destroyed.
Dapper, I know where it is. It's in the same place as all the 10 million human fossils.
Obviously. Officially unofficial suborbital platypus, who's been a member for 19 months, says, did someone mention orbital antipodian animals? Sorry, suborbital antipodian animals. Yes, we did. Yes.
I am shocked. That was like maybe the one time that you could ever reference this particular man.
Oh man, I love how many of you guys have amazing screen names. It's awesome. Thank you so much.
It really is like nowhere else on YouTube that I've seen.
It's always fun when people who watch me show up on other channels and like super chat on like Paulo Gia's channel or something. And he's forced to read out these names like officially unofficial suborbital platypus. And he has no idea what the context is. Right. He has no idea what the context is. I can't say no idea because he does every once in a while watch my stuff. So if you're watching, hey Paul. Sorry to make your life so much harder with all these names. But don't stop, everybody. Don't stop. Keep it up. All right, here we go.
Interesting. Okay.
But see, there's also an ecological component to the flood.
Oh, here we go. Ecological zonation.
The first thing buried are marine organisms.
Okay.
The next thing buried are like swampy edge of the continents organisms. Then you have organisms from higher ground.
Uh-huh.
So there's an
Okay, we'll take a drink and we're going to talk about ecological zonation, even though we already have talked about it. Okay, so first of all... Okay, go ahead.
Okay, never mind.
No, okay. So first of all, we don't stop finding marine organisms, which is a little bit of a problem, right?
Exactly. And we don't wait. We don't stop finding marine organisms or coastline or swamp dwellers. Like
true.
they're
yeah.
in the layers.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Is like we don't go from marine to coastline and swamp to creatures from the mainland. We go from marine and coastline and swamp dwellers to marine and coastline and swamp dwellers and mainland, and so on. And also, like we said earlier, the ordering of the marine fossils doesn't even go from deep to shallow, like this whole idea presents, right? Because the basic idea is supposed to be that you're preserving organisms more or less in order of like elevation, right? So the higher elevation they are, the later in the rocks that they're going to be buried. But like, it's just not true. Like for instance, we know that the Hell Creek Formation was full of things that are relatively low elevation. We've got like cattails, and we've got like freshwater and marine fish, mollusks, crustaceans. Nearby, we've got formations that have like mosasaurs, gigantic sea turtles like Archaeological. Like we've got all of this indicating that the Hell Creek Formation and the adjacent marine areas were extremely low elevation. But they're found at the top of the Cretaceous. So how does any of this work? And also, like we said earlier, like the fact that we don't find any pollen in the lowest layers, anything below the Jurassic, that's a problem. Or, well, okay, any angiosperm pollen. We can find things like fern spores, right? Which isn't technically pollen, but it's something. But particularly angiosperm pollen, that kind of thing, we don't find that all the way through, even though we know that today pollen makes its way into the ocean just fine. So like,
I just wish that somebody would ask Rob, do you acknowledge the existence of marine organisms in every single layer of rock? like as in like, it's in the Cretaceous, it's in the Jurassic, it's in the Cenozoic. You're gonna find marine organisms in all of those layers, every one.
Mhm.
Like, will he acknowledge that? Do you
No.
think if asked directly?
Oh, if asked directly? Oh, yeah, I don't know, maybe.
Because like it feels like if he does acknowledge that, then he would have to acknowledge that this whole ecological order thing is bullshit.
Also, Savage Cobra, the Ediacaran vertebrate for $4.99 says, there was that one comment on Dr. Dan's video saying that jets fly in low Earth orbit. I want my astronaut pin. Who said that? That is an extremely dumb take.
Oh, Dapper, I've done a debate with a flat earther who told me that airplanes cannot fly because of the Coriolis effect.
What?
He said if the Earth was a sphere, then the Coriolis effect would make it so that airplanes could not fly.
Let me guess. He did not actually do any math to show you what the force applied by the Coriolis effect to an airplane would be at any given latitude and
You'll be
speed
surprised.
and elevation.
There was some math there,
There
but
was.
the thing is that he just forgot about this thing called like the conservation of momentum.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It was an understandable, elementary school mistake.
I mean, that's why when you're on an airplane traveling at, like 800 miles an hour, and the hostess or the steward or whatever we're calling them today hands you like your can of Coke and your little glass full of ice, if they put it when they put it down on the table, it flies back at you at 800 miles an hour and impales you, and then you die. That's why flights are so dangerous.
Yeah, that's what he thought was going to happen. Like as soon as the airplane like went into the air, all of a sudden it's lost all the momentum it had on the surface of the Earth. It would just be instantly like veered off of track by thousands of miles.
I love that like 6th grade math and physics is all you need to debunk the flat Earth, and yet it's still around. And look, the young Earth isn't a whole lot better. All you need for that is usually a high school education, or at max, like being a sophomore in any relevant field in college.
Yeah, it's like maybe you need 6th grade math to disprove flat Earth. You need like maybe 8th or 9th grade curriculum for young Earth.
Most of young Earth creationism. There's some stuff that's a little bit more advanced in there. Laserfan, who's been a member for 12 months, thank you very much, and is at the amniote level, says, the magical flood was always nice enough to sort all layers by radiometric decay with a curious emoji. Yeah, that's another thing, is how is it that the radiometric dates of all these layers seem so consistent? That you can't really explain that just by saying, well, the decay was accelerated. Well, I mean, then it would have been accelerated uniformly, and all of the dates should correspond to just one date.
Yeah, it's like, why do we just magically certain ratios of radiometric isotopes just so happen to be deposited by this flood nearby to oil deposits.
I know. We'll go with the raw mat answer, which is that older uranium is heavier, so it sank lower.
Yeah, even though it's not. He's literally just looking at the atomic weights instead of the molecular like occurrence of these elements in nature
Right.
and what
And
they're
also, older uranium doesn't really mean anything, is another thing. That's not a,
Yeah.
not a meaningful phrase. Pillowpunk, half dog, half canine for $5 says, just like with subfossils, we can find sediments going through the process of lithification right now, so they can't pretend new rocks aren't forming. Exactly, Pillowpunk. You are completely correct about that. Savage
I would
Cobra,
say actually he's wrong about that in that
Gee.
they still can pretend that they aren't forming.
well, yeah, they can pretend, but she's not wrong that they are forming.
Yes.
Yeah.
All the time I come across creationists who pretend they are not.
Savage Cobra, the Eddie Akara invertebrate for $4.99 says, nearly 6,000 hours of flight time says that guy's full of crap. Yeah. Well, no, see, you just don't know that you're flying over a flat stationary Earth. That's the thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's what the Bible says, so it's got to be true.
Ecological component to that, and it's successive and it's in order. And
Flood
if
bed.
humans are buried here, that's the part that's getting erased first.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Another thing that might have destroyed human fossils is subduction.
What's that?
Well, it's continental drift. Plates.
You don't just start with continents drift. Okay, he's talking about now. I can see his hands do. All right, fine. You know what? He's just not doing it the way I would. So, okay, whatever. It's fine, Rob.
Diving under other plates. If humans are buried in a place where there's a subduction zone, maybe the human fossils have been melted by now.
I mean, look, there are definitely fossils that have been destroyed by subduction. So, you know what? Because I'm thirsty and feeling generous and it's late in the show, I take a drink for Rob technically getting something right.
I'm not even gonna take a drink for that one, Dapper. That he's just literally spitballing. He's like, maybe some glaciers came by, scraped off the layers. Maybe they subducted. Maybe a meteorite
Are you
came
telling
and
me-
blew away the layers.
Are you telling me you don't think any fossils have been destroyed by subduction?
No, he's literally just spitballing anything that could
Okay,
destroy.
but counterpoint, I'm thirsty.
Okay, that valid. Take a drink.
That's interesting.
I mean,
I just
Catastrophic
cannot give
plate
credit.
tectonics is-
I cannot give Rob credit for this.
All right.
It's an idea that I think all of us at CMI hold to, at least mostly.
And so what's that? So a catastrophic plate tectonics, CPT, is referring to massive movement of plates during the flood.
During the flood. In fact, the flood was probably propelled by plate movement.
Hey, here's a fun thing. You can do some back of the envelope calculations to figure out roughly how much heat was released by all the continents moving at the speeds that would have been needed for them to get from roughly Pangea to their current location, because Pangea, or sometimes Rodinia, is what creationists usually propose as the pre-flood world. And you don't even have to include the radiometric decay heat, just the heat from the continents doing the traveling, and I'm being very generous with this when I did the math myself, is enough to boil the oceans at least twice over, just on their own, just the continents moving. Because it turns out, you can't just move things for free. And also, I want to point out that John Baumgartner is the guy who came up with this model, right?
Yep.
And he used his modeling program, Terra. But did you know that he had to increase the thermal diffusivity of the rocks of Earth by like 2 orders of magnitude to even make it physically possible for the continental plates to move this quickly?
The great thing about Baumgartner is that he fully admits that his model requires supernatural, miraculous intervention by God to dissipate all the heat. He fully admits this. He has no problem saying, yeah, my model requires miracles. But then, like, all of the creationists downstream from him are trying to use his model and trying to say that there's not a heat problem at the same time.
Yep. Mr. Cliff for £2 says moo, and hey, we are 65% of the way to that fancy avatar, and then a little bit past that, and we are at Ben Gets Free Pizza, and I have to go and translate the night before Christmas and then record it. So we could do it.
And plates moving not at the rate your fingernails grow, but about as fast as you could walk or you can run.
Yes.
So catastrophic.
Which again is physically impossible unless you just change the physical parameters of Earth, right? Baumgartner's model can't work unless you increase the thermal diffusivity of the Earth's rocks, which isn't something you can just kind of do. That's in itself a miracle. So this isn't a model. This is just some kind of idea for a fantasy novel where a wizard did it.
Plate tectonics, lots of subduction, a lot of things being deposited have now been brought underneath into the mantle.
Philpunk, half dog, half cannon for $5 says, "Oh, so that's good enough for human fossils, but not for the oceanic crust, Rob?" I think he would say that the oceanic crust has had episodes of subduction. I guess I can't say that, and that, like, that's why some of it's gone and most of it's newer than most other rocks on like continents. But then again, I don't know, because part of the problem is it's hard to predict what he's going to say because it's all ridiculous, right? So like, which direction of absolute insanity is he going to go? It's hard to say.
Normally, you're pretty talented at predicting where creationists are going to go next,
Yeah, but
Dapper. I got
part of that is that they're creationists talking about topics I've heard that creationists talk about before. So I roughly know where they stand. With Rob, though, I don't think I've heard him talk about geology to any extent before. So this is relatively new for me. But then Savage, Cobra, the Ediacara invertebrate, just gifted another 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. My goodness, we're at 73%. Let's take 5 drinks. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We'll hit play.
And have melted.
So we have multiple explanations for why we do not find human fossils.
Dude, you got to 2 that you accept and didn't debunk yourselves.
Hey, 2 is technically multiple. You have to drink for being technically correct on that one.
All right, fine. Take a drink. Ugh. All right.
Today.
Multiple.
Okay.
And we know the fossil record is fickle.
Hmm.
We know that things that live together are not buried together because they're alive now. And that we don't find them together in the fossil record. So just because we don't find humans buried with dinosaurs, just because we don't find lots of humans deep in the fossil record, that doesn't actually mean anything.
What is he talking? Like, what specifically is he talking about?
He's now just saying now the missing human fossils just don't mean anything. They just don't mean anything, guys.
Okay, well, here's the thing, right? Like, I don't think on its own that the missing human fossils is enough to just, like, by itself say, okay, the flood model is out, right? I think we have more than enough that are, defeaters on their own. This is not, like, my favorite version of, like, why the flood couldn't have happened. But, like, it means something, right? Like, your models do predict that we should find humans somewhere. Why don't we? The fact that we don't is a problem, but I do consider it to be a relatively minor one compared to things like, the heat problem, or the fact that most of the supposed flood rocks just don't show any physical evidence of having been deposited by a flood, and in some cases, physically couldn't have been. But also, John Hopkins just gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. So, let's take another 5. My goodness, I'm going to be falling over for Chesh's show. Sorry, Chesh. 1.
Your audience just loved you too much, Dapper.
They do. 3, 4, and 5. 80% of the way to the fancy avatar. We can do it. You guys can do it. I believe in you. I think it's like less than $70. We got this. All right, here we go. That's me trying to do very, very rough math in my head while having had 55 drinks. So, if I got it wrong, please don't try to crucify me.
But I have one last question.
Okay.
Jillian, addicted to Satan Ren, why has Dapper Dinosaur stopped reading who gets the memberships? Honestly, I don't have a great reason other than that I wanted to get back to content. I tell you what, I'll do a poll. Because I felt like it was not adding much, but I'm going to start a poll. Would you like me to read the names of people who are gifted memberships? And part of the problem is, even if we go with yes, it won't always be the case, because sometimes there will just be too many names, and I don't want to go through a list of like 30 names in a row. But I will start doing it more if that's something you guys really want. I did it because I thought it wasn't adding much to your viewing experience. But if you disagree with me, here's a good chance to let me know. So, we're starting out with no strong, so there's that. There was no big decision. I just felt like it wasn't adding to the experience. So
It is this. If we do indeed find a pre-flood human fossil, will we be able to recognize it?
I mean, it would look like a human, so Yes. I mean, why? Okay. You know what? I'm curious to see if Robert Carter says no, why he would say no. Because I mean, it seems like an obvious yes to me. Because if you can't recognize it as a human fossil, then what makes it a human
Yeah.
fossil?
Dapper, how many times have you heard creationists trying to tell you that fossils in the fossil record look exactly like modern species, like
So many
unchanged?
times.
So many times that these things are completely recognizable to creationists as modern species, even if there are differences that an actual paleontologist would recognize. The creationists are always telling me that they look exactly like modern species.
Yeah. Kent Bohemian Devonian Denisovan Halstead for $4.99 says, "Why did your parents name you Dapper Dinosaur?" They didn't. They named me Tim or Timothy. This Dapper Dinosaur is just what I go by here on the internet because it is an accurate description. Savage Cobra, the Eddie current vertebrate for $4.99 says, "What better way to talk about current events than completely smashed?" I mean, I have to agree with you there. Star Song for $2 says, "You left out the whatever works best option." Oh, well, okay, but I feel like whatever works best is going to largely be something that, you guys can let me know, because you're the ones watching, right? I don't really get the audience experience for the show, because, well, quite frankly, it's hard for me to rewatch them. So I usually don't. So yeah, it's whatever works best is ultimately what works best for my audience, and right now it's looking like it's leaning towards no. So I probably won't go back. Laserfan says Timothy Dinosaur. Yes, that is in fact my full last name is Timothy Dinosaur. Yep. It was a great coincidence that the human family that adopted me was named Dinosaur as their last name. It's a very unusual last name. It doesn't come up much. Oddly enough, despite it sounding like it might be Greek, it's Irish. Yeah. Weird. So, yeah.
Excellent question. Because I don't think modern humans necessarily look exactly like ancient humans.
No one else does either, but that doesn't mean they're not recognizable as like hominins, man. Like you look at a Homo erectus skull and you're not thinking like, I don't know, it might be a gazelle. Like that's not what's happening.
It might just be common design. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe.
Mm-hmm. And most ancient humans, they look, Neanderthal, Homo erectus.
Okay, but you can't tell me that you would look at the skull on the right and not recognize its kinship to the skull on the left, right? Like, they're very clearly different. They have different features, right? Like, they're listed here, like occipital contour, chin, cheekbone and angle, nasal bone projection is much, much stronger in Neanderthals. The brow ridges are more prominent. The forehead is flatter it's less vertical, I suppose, on Neanderthals. Brain case shape is more globular in modern humans. But, like, can anyone honestly tell me that you could look at these skulls and not think that they belong to very, very similar organisms?
I got some bad news for you, Dapper. Even if, for some reason, somebody is unable to recognize the similarities between these, we're not finding hominids in the Mesozoic layers either.
That's true too. Yeah. Like what?
Like we're not finding even hominids that look different than modern day humans.
Right.
Like we're not finding those either.
The idea here is supposed to be that some human is going to be buried in the Mesozoic, and we're not going to recognize it. But like, what would it look? Do you think that there's currently a fossil from the Mesozoic that might be an undiagnosed human? Which one?
You know what? Maybe. Okay, here's what where they're going with this, right? Like, if we look even a little bit in the Cenozoic layers, we start to see humans that look different. That have they look like this skull looks a little bit different than this skull. So if you keep going down in the layers until you get to the flood layers, maybe the humans would have much more basal characteristics. Like maybe they would be more of like a shrew-like mammal of some kind. You know what I mean? Maybe that's the creationist model that they're going.
There's like tiny, like 4-inch long descendants of Adam and Eve buried in the Mesozoic.
Well, I was making a joke that actually they're going so far into creationism that they're going back to evolution. You know and what? That if you trace it back down in the Cenozoic, they become more and more basal mammals. And then
Adam and Eve were not Homo habilis, they were Simulestes. We figured it out. We figured it out, everybody. If you don't know what Simulestes is, it's a tiny, not even quite a mammal thing that looks vaguely shrew-like from like the Mesozoic. And
I think that we should just go all the way with it. And Adam and Eve were actually Luca, the last universal common ancestor.
You know, if that's what we went for, I would largely retract most of my biology-based complaints about young Earth creationism. Jillian addicted to Satan ran for $2 says what I'm assuming is dinosaur, but in Gaelic, and with a tetrapod and a Godzilla emoji. We will take a drink for that. And yes, that is obviously the name was changed at Ellis Island, which isn't also really a thing that really kind of happened, but whatever. And let me update the fundraising because we are close. We could do it. 84% of the way.
Denisovan. Modern humans look a little different.
Okay.
We're not as strongly built as our ancestors. Things like that.
Neanderthals and Denisovans aren't your ancestors, my guy. Just take a drink for that. They're a sister group. They're not the... Look, it is true that people from Europe and Asia have minor amounts of admixture from both species. But as populations, they are not human ancestors.
I will say that some ancient geneticists, like David Reich, like a very prominent one at Harvard, has said something similar to this. Like that one way to think of modern day non-Africans is as the Neanderthal populations that have just changed with influx of Homo sapiens or whatever. Like,
but the DNA
he has tried to convey it that way.
But the thing is that the genetics of modern non-African populations are dominated, like, just overwhelmingly by Homo sapiens DNA, and like the non-Homo sapiens DNA is like a tiny fraction. It's like 5 maybe percent in
but
most people.
The reason for that is selection against the Neanderthal genes, as in terms of at least what David Reich's lab has been finding, is that the actual like ancestry is way more than is indicated by the genetics.
But the problem there is that that's what normally happens when you have introgression from another species into a species, is that most of the foreign alleles turn out to be detrimental and not play well, and so they get weeded out over time. And that just still leaves you with the original species, but with a tiny admixture. Even if you did the genealogy, there would be a much higher percentage of the other species, it still leaves you with what's genetically the first species. So I'm very unsympathetic to this line of argumentation, but you know what? It's also not my fight. So
I mean, it's nuances. All I was trying, like, I have actually heard like credentialed prominent geneticists trying to frame it as something along the lines of Neanderthals like being our ancestors. I have heard that kind of science communication, and I don't love it, but I have heard it from like actual scientists saying that.
I mean, fair enough. Melly for $5 says, I bet if you showed the average person only the skull on the right and not the one on the left, so that was the Neanderthal skull, they would say it was a human skull with a Godzilla. Well, first we'll drink for the Godzilla, and then I will say, yeah, I agree with you. So here's the drink.
Absolutely.
Mr. Cliff for £2 says, more fancy avatar. Well, we're 86% of the way there. We could do it. We're not that far off. Here we go.
But again, those are post-flood, right? So
And they're post-flood too, but the earliest human fossils don't look like you and me necessarily.
So if I do find a human fossil that is from before the flood, will I assume that that's an early post-flood fossil?
You probably assume that it's an early human offshoot of chimpanzees or something like that. I don't know what the...
No, you wouldn't. He's a creationist. Why would he assume that?
Yeah, wait, what?
What? So is he... Okay, so maybe he's not trying to say that like, Joel is going to assume that, but maybe he means that, like, when we found, like, Sahelanthropus chidensis, that was supposed to be a chimpanzee offshoot, and that's why it looks so basal. And that's been mistaken?
He's saying that if we found pre-flood humans, we might think that they were some chimpanzee offshoot in human evolution or something.
I mean, that seems like he's agreeing with a whole lot about human evolution that he normally wouldn't agree with.
So in this instance, Sahelanthropus would actually be like a pre-flood human. Like what?
So maybe we have found pre-flood humans and they're just like Sahelanthropus or like Ardipithecus, and those are actually humans and not apes, according to him?
Like, we're getting closer and closer to like just human evolution.
Right. Like, look, dude, if you're going to accept that, like, things that are so basal that people would mistake them for chimpanzees are actually humans, what argument do you have left against human evolution, right? Like, I can't even parse that. I'm taking a drink. Wow.
Yeah. That's all you can even say, really. I mean, at this point, like they're just spitballing. They're just saying anything in the hopes that something sticks.
Yeah.
Evolution say. But they'd also probably say, "Oh no, this isn't. This human fossil didn't come from this part."
Listen to the on-screen thing where it says like, subscribe, and notifications, but do it for me, not for Robert Carter. Philipunk, half dog, half canine for $2 says he's literally saying humans have evolved. Yeah, he is at that point. Like, and you can't tell me that going from like something that's basically a chimpanzee, so much so that it would be confused for one, is just microevolution. At that point, like, dude, microevolution doesn't mean anything at that point.
Yeah, don't the creationists say that like Australopithecus was all ape?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, like,
yeah.
I mean, shouldn't Rob be saying that they're all humans and they're just early pre-flood humans, and we just think that they look so different that we're calling them apes?
I mean,
but
based
no, like
based on what he's saying here, yeah,
they say Australopithecus is all ape,
look,
not human at all.
It's like what I was talking about earlier, right? Where you have these post hoc, ad hoc ideas that break everything else, but they work for this one specific thing, and you just don't think about them in other contexts because they're not actually supposed to be part of a model. They're just thought-stopping techniques, like it's a cult. Because ultimately, young Earth creationism is cult adjacent. Not actually a cult, in my opinion, because I don't think it has the level of control that would be needed for an actual cult. But nor do I actually think it's as abusive as most cults tend to be. And when I use cult here, I'm talking about in the sense of like high control organizations, which do not have to be religious, but often are. And I am not talking in the sense of simply a new religious movement, because new religious movements do not have to be cults. And cults do not have to be new religious movements in this sense. So, Dan McClellan, if you're watching, sorry, I know you don't like the word cult. I hope I clarified. I don't think you're watching, although we have been on stream together, so maybe you are, I don't know. Well, here we go. Let me find my mouse and hit play, because I couldn't see where my mouse was.
Part of the fossil record, it was reworked. It was eroded from somewhere else and deposited in this layer.
Now, that is a thing that does happen, and that creationists like to ignore. Like, I've heard more than one creationist complain about the fact that at Olduvai Gorge, there was a, like, anatomically modern Homo sapiens found, and then they just ignore the fact that it was very obviously reworked, because the sediment it's buried in is a collection of just scattered bits of the higher strata, meaning that it was a hole that was dug into the strata where the Olduvai Gorge Homo habilis were found, and then the body was deposited in the hole, meaning it was buried. They just like to ignore that. And they were like, well, they found a modern human at Olduvai Gorge. Not really.
Or it was a burial. Someone dug a hole and put a human in it and then filled it in again. And therefore, that's why it looks like it's buried in this rock layer, but it's really not. The human died out millions of years after this rock layer was laid down.
Yeah, but Rob, we can check for that. We can look at the sediment.
Well, you know, Dapper, burying human remains, famously an activity that humans do not do.
Well, but it's just like that. That's the thing. Like, we know how to tell if something's been reworked. It's not like it's actually all that difficult to determine, right? Is the strata at that location consistent with the local area that seems undisturbed? Or does it have a whole bunch of stuff that's been mixed in from higher layers? If it has a whole bunch of stuff mixed in from higher layers, well, that's what a hole that was dug and then filled in looks like. Is that what this looks like? If yes, then yeah, it was reworked. What does he think that we don't have a good way to tell if something was reworked?
I honestly think he probably hasn't given it much thought.
He
probably hasn't looked at what actually makes scientists and geologists determine if something's been reworked. And he probably is just saying, oh, wow, it just sounds like such an ad hoc explanation. You know, he's not actually looking at what evidence would suggest that was the case.
All right, so here's one thing. We have less than 2 minutes of this left. We're going to go over in an effort to get it done.
I'm strapping in.
All right.
So, not just what you're saying is that the evolutionary mindset will actually cause them to reinterpret this so that it's placed at a much later date.
Yeah, and you can also redate the entire rock layer. Oh, we thought this rock layer was older, but it's actually much younger than we thought. There's
not on the basis of what fossil you find in there. Like, I'm going to take a drink. Fossil-bearing layers are occasionally reassessed, but that's because what happens is that we actually get better absolute dating for that area that were before just known stratigraphically. Or sometimes, like what recently happened with the KPG boundary, we get more accurate results, which allow us to round to a near million, like the nearest million number. That's a little bit different, right? Like that's why the KPG went from 65 to 66 million years. Because the older estimates had bigger margins of error, but the whole number that you round to was 65. We've recently had better... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to know, like, you did give an example right there, but like, that was just changing it a little bit. Like,
yeah, it wasn't even
plus or
technically
minus
changing.
a million here or there. Like, what Rob was just describing sounds like you're finding like something like the Cretaceous layer, and then you find a rabbit in it, and you're like, oh, well, actually, we were wrong. The Cretaceous layer was actually laid down 20 million years ago, or something. Like,
yeah,
and I'm not aware of a single instance of anything like that ever happening.
No,
I don't know if you are, but
to my knowledge, it hasn't happened. The thing is that like you don't just willy-nilly redate layers because of fossils that you find in them. Most layers at this point have been carefully stratigraphically dated. Well, actually, they've been carefully dated both stratigraphically as well as absolutely, by using different volcanic rocks that are associated.
Like bracketing the igneous layers.
Exactly. By the way, would you like me to read the names of people who were gifted memberships? No one with 54% of the vote, and yes with 45% with 64 votes. So it seems like what I'm getting is about a little less than half of the people don't care either way, but of the people who care, slightly more than half would prefer that I not. So I'm going to, for now, continue to not. If it's something that you would like me to do, is read out the names more consistently or even at all, please let me know if that's really something that adds to your enjoyment of the stream, because that's the reason I'm not doing it right now, is because I don't think it does add much to the enjoyment of the stream, and it's faster to not, so, you know, there's that. All right, here we go.
There's examples of these things.
Okay.
These things have happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what's an example, Rob?
Right? Please, Rob, give us an example.
I mean, look, it's not like I have an encyclopedic knowledge of like every single rock formation that's ever been dated. Like, I absolutely do not. I don't think anyone does. So, I mean, maybe it has.
Well, I could see if he was talking about like a certain formation, but when I'm thinking layer, I'm thinking of like a stratigraphic layer or something. I'm not thinking of like just one formation.
Well, either way, Rob, if you watch this, let me know, because I don't know of any, but I can't say that it hasn't happened, because, I mean, I'm not about to go do an exhaustive review of all dating papers that have ever been published about geology, like, you know, stratigraphic layers. Like, that's just not going to happen, because I got other stuff to do, frankly. So, I mean, if you have an example, Rob, and you watch this, which, again, I do know that Rob does occasionally watch me, let me know. I would be very curious. In fact, I would be perfectly willing to have you on, Dr. Carter, in a friendly discussion in which I will not be angry or mean to you, and where we can talk about, you know, the redating of some bit of rock and why it is or wasn't appropriate, and what you think that can tell us about, like, the dating of fossils, the, you know, reliability of radiometric dating, geology as a whole, all that stuff. All that would be an interesting conversation. So, Rob, if you watch this and you have an example, reach out. You know how to contact me. I mean, one way is to just write a nasty article using my name on creation.com. You did that once. So you do it again, I guess.
But at the end of the day, I guess we have already shown many reasons for why we don't really find pre-flood human fossils.
No, you showed like maybe two, and they both didn't make sense. But okay.
Yeah.
Many.
Well, wait. Oh. They did show many reasons. It's just that they also debunked like 98% of the ones that they showed,
right,
and
exactly.
then the two that they didn't debunk, we debunked. So
yeah.
Potential.
They
reasons.
showed many explanations, just none of them good.
Fair.
Potential reasons. Okay.
We didn't actually answer conclusively because it can't be answered conclusively.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the nature of history and the nature of the historical sciences. No one was there to see it.
I mean, okay, I agree that conclusive is probably too high a standard, but you should have some plausible mechanism, and you don't.
Except you can say certain things conclusively about history, like the Pompeii eruption, like Mount Vesuvius eruption affecting Pompeii. Like,
yeah, that's pretty conclusive.
We're pretty concrete about that. Like,
yeah,
you can be certain when the archaeological evidence is like very concrete. Like, we know that Pompeii was buried in the eruption by Mount Vesuvius. Like that's concrete. That's known because the evidence firmly establishes it. And you can
Yeah.
do this for historical events.
Well,
It wasn't like we had scientists recording on a notepad, all this processes happening. That's not true.
once again, the fetishization of eyewitness testimony.
Yeah, it's not true, nor is it sufficient or necessary to
Yeah.
establish any historical fact.
And so we're left with a giant void called history that we're trying to fill in with.
Wait, I thought you told me that the Bible was your book of history, Robert Carter. Are you telling me the Bible isn't good enough to tell you how to solve all these problems?
No. Rob Carter is saying that he's filling his void with the Bible.
Oh, he's got a Bible-shaped hole in his heart?
Yeah.
Okay.
Interpretive ideas. And that's what this is an interpretive idea of history that can possibly explain this question. But the question is not really that big a deal. And there's no reason for a skeptic to jump.
Okay. Like I said, I actually kind of agree that it's not the biggest deal. And there's a reason why, like, when I talk about reasons I don't accept the flood, that, like, missing human fossils are pretty much never on the list, right? Like, there's so many stronger reasons to reject the flood that this is kind of minor compared to them. But on its own, it's a reason to question, right? Like, the fact that we don't have any of these flood human fossils, even though we really should, it makes you wonder. Now, again, like I said, I don't think it's the best one, but
I might disagree a little bit on here, but like that's just because I wouldn't say like in terms of like objectively what are the strongest arguments against it, but in terms of my favorite arguments that I love using against creationists, this is one of my favorites.
that's fair.
Because the entire purpose of the flood was to kill all of humanity except for Noah's family. So it's a murder mystery. And we don't have a single body. Like, that's the one thing that the flood was supposed to do, was create a bunch of human bodies. That's the one thing. It's one job. And we don't have any evidence of it. It's like, to me, it is kind of a big deal. And it is like, if the flood was true, like the one thing it was supposed to do, we have no evidence of. So to me, I do like bringing it up. And I like bringing it up too, because a lot of the times the creationists do not think about this question and it catches them off guard and they have no answer for it.
I never thought about that. Metageeky in the chat says, would said hole be filled better with some Apocrypha? You know, I honestly would be curious to know what, like, Robert Carter's position on the Apocrypha is. Because, I don't know, I like a lot of the Apocrypha. Plus, if you're trying to argue for dragons being dinosaurs, Bell and the Dragon is a great way to help you out with that. A free dragon story. Yeah, Bell and the Dragon is a free Bible story.
Peter that has the talking cross as a companion for Jesus, right?
Not in the standard Apocrypha. You might be thinking of the, like, New Testament extra biblical bits, but the Apocrypha, as typically assessed, are all put into the Old Testament in Catholic and Orthodox books, and they include things like the books of Maccabees, Judith, Tobit, the longer ending of Daniel, stuff like that. Max P for $10 says, for the Avatar, with their third super chat. Thank you so much. That's really awesome. It's always great to see people who are just getting into the whole doing that super chat and stuff. So awesome. We are 89% of the way, and we only have, do we even have a full minute? Not quite a full minute left of this video. So we're coming down to the wire. Isn't that Peter's Gospel of Talking Cross? I mean, it might be. I honestly don't remember, but it's still not contained. When you say the Apocrypha, what you usually mean can be summed up as the books that are found in either the Eastern Orthodox or Roman Catholic Old Testament that you cannot find in most Protestant Old Testament.
Yeah, what I should have said was like non-canonical gospel or something instead of Apocrypha.
Yeah. So, look, there's a long history as to why they're called the Apocrypha, why they're not in Protestant Bibles, and it's definitely off topic for this. But yeah, it is a whole thing, and I would be curious to know what Rob Carter's take on the Apocrypha is, because it's always a curious question to me when it comes to Protestants, because they really like to go about the whole thing like, we're not going to add or take away anything from the Bible, and then it's like, hey, remember that time you removed a whole bunch of books from the Old Testament?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we had good reasons. I'm like, okay, but you're still adding to or removing from the Bible.
Yeah, you don't think that
So-
we have good reasons to remove the inaccurate books of the Bible that clearly don't reflect reality as has been established by the scientific method? I mean, that's a pretty good reason to remove those ones,
Yeah,
right?
hey, I mean, get rid of Genesis in that case.
Yep.
I mean, yeah.
Jump on us saying, "Hey, you think that that humans live with dinosaurs? How come you don't find any humans buried with dinosaurs? Ha ha ha!" And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever."
Yeah, and I think the needle in the haystack argument.
I mean, okay, if someone's going to come at you like that, then yeah, I guess you can dismiss them. But, like, you should actually have a reasonable answer for that question.
I mean, he's talking about it as if like this is like a very common question that he is confronted by like all the time. And now after all this, after an hour, he just did his little workshop for how this interaction would go, and the answer he provides is yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's where
all he's got.
That's where basically we're ending this. We do have a little bit more, but that does seem like it's going to be his final words. Like, who cares? Like, I mean,
Like,
you
his
care enough to
argument
do this whole thing.
His argument is just yeah, whatever.
Let's see. Mapleson for 5 beaver bucks says, Fourth Maccabees on the Sovereignty of Reason is my favorite apocrypha. Any reason they got rid of it? Okay, well, because I've been paid to answer the question as to why Protestant Bibles don't have the apocrypha. So there is a bit of a history. So first of all, we have to go back to Saint Jerome, who was translating the Bible into Latin to produce what we now call the Vulgate. When he was doing this, he decided to translate the works that were included in the so-called Old Testament that were in the Septuagint, but that were not known from any Hebrew manuscript traditions. Now, in doing so, he went a little bit against what he thought of as his best judgment, because he was like, I don't know, if we can't find them in Hebrew, they really count. And St. Jerome was actually unusual in being one of the first Christians to be interested in Hebrew in the first place. Nowadays, Christians routinely translate their Old Testaments from the Masoretic text, at least where possible, as like their baseline text. But at the time of St. Jerome, that was actually pretty unusual. Most Christians were reading the Bible in Greek, and entirely, right? Their Old Testament was just the Septuagint, and their New Testament was, that collection of books that had been promulgated. So there was always a little bit of skepticism, especially in Western Christianity, over them. But over time, in Western Christianity, they became a bit more broadly accepted. The Roman Catholics do call them deuterocanonical, meaning that they are a secondary canon. They're not as important as the non-deuterocanonical, but still canonical books. But they still consider them to be part of the Bible. Now, when the Protestant Reformation came around, at first, the deuterocanonical books retained that idea of like, well, these aren't as important, but they're probably good to study. But then eventually, what started happening was Bible printers found it be cheaper to not print the Apocrypha after the tradition had emerged of printing the Apocrypha in a separate section. So in Protestants' Bibles, they started to say, well, because of their secondary nature, we'll put them in a separate section. So if you get like a 1611 reprint of the King James, there's a section in the middle between the Old and New Testaments for the Apocrypha. But Bible printers found that it was starting to get easier to just not print that section. And it was cheaper. And no one was complaining. So then they started just not printing them. And it became standard for Protestant Bibles to simply not have this Apocrypha section. And then later on, Protestant theologians came up with theological reasons as to why they would prefer that they not have the Apocrypha anymore, after it was already standard for non-theological reasons. Philipunk Half Dog Half Canine for $10 says, actually, we have great explanations, the best explanations. I'm talking so many explanations, and they're so plausible too. But also, we don't need any explanations because the question doesn't matter. And yeah, he was kind of channeling Trump there, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a perfect summation. That was perfect.
Is Robert Carter the Donald Trump of young Earth creationism? Maybe.
I don't even know. I mean, I think that's definitely being uncharitable to Rob.
Sorry. You know what? Maybe Rob takes that as a compliment. I don't know how he feels about Donald Trump.
I mean, I guess, yeah. If Rob likes being called the Donald Trump of creationism, that's you, Rob. 100%.
Yeah,
take that title and run with it.
That just answers that perfectly for me as well.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed Joel and my lighthearted discussion on this topic. If you like these sort of things, tune into creation.com talk. Go to creation.com, look up some of our articles.
Look up the article that has me in it. That's an article that exists on creation.com. It's the one where initially Robert Carter tried to reveal my real name, but he got the wrong Dapper dinosaur, so it was the wrong name, but it was the real name of a different Dapper dinosaur, which is also not super okay. We're 93%. I don't think we're going to get there. We're so close.
I hate when that happens to me.
Yeah.
I caught the wrong Dapper dinosaur.
I mean, it can happen.
We have a Facebook group. We're all over the internet. And in fact, if you want to have a CMI speaker come to your church or your organization, just contact us and we'll send someone out and come to you to answer some more questions.
What do you think the chances are that they would actually agree to come on the channel?
Like, can we do that?
Yeah, I don't know.
I want to send a random CMI representative somewhere.
I mean, I want to send them just to my channel for like a chat. And
I
we
want to
just
send
got
like a random
10
field.
more Dapper Dinosaur memberships gifted. So we will take 10 drinks, and we are just shy of the free pizza for Bent. I don't know exactly how much farther it is. I think we have to get to like 110 or something. Really close. So here's 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so Grayson, you got anything coming up on your channel you want to tell people about?
Yeah, I got a lot of stuff coming up because I've been since between the last React and this one, I've had like a horrible 2 weeks. Like, I haven't put out any videos. Like, my dog died, and I like really hurt my neck. I've been just like I've been trying to lay as motionless as possible for the last week. And so I plan on getting back on the horse, making videos again. William Lane Craig just made a whole podcast about me and my channel. So I feel like I have to respond to that.
Wait, really?
Yeah, I made a video critiquing the Kalam cosmological argument and fixing the argument. And he was so offended that he made an entire like hour-long podcast about Grayson Hawk's YouTube channel and my Kalam video. So I owe William Lane Craig a response to that one for sure.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Well, we got a couple things.
Also, I want to make a couple videos highlighting like the conservative creation, the conservative Christian to flat earther pipeline.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds interesting. Yeah, because
Candace Owens is going to be Candace Owens is going to be like the star child for it.
Well, there's also she's reportedly very interested in the results of the final experiment with Will Duffy. And I think she might actually just accept those results and go back on her flirtation with Flat Earth. I hope so.
I would love to see that. But it's not like there haven't been a plethora of other experiments that have definitively shown that the Earth cannot be flat. But
you're right.
Okay,
you're right.
This is the one that you like. That's fine.
Yeah. Prixie, are you registered to vote? Check now. Purple says for $5. Just found a flea on my dog. Wish me luck cleaning the whole house. Also pizza. And then with their 10th super chat, Prixie, are you registered to vote? Check now. Purple says, did I do it? And yes, you did. You absolutely did. Not only is Bent getting a free pizza, I need to go find the Night Before Christmas and translate it into into Klingon. I was going to say into Christmas, but that's not a language. Well, okay, Santa is a language, but I'm not going to translate it into Santa. And if you know what Santa is, you know why I'm not going to translate it into Santa. Jester, Lord of Fools, who's been a member for 11 months, says, I keep showing up for the end of every stream. Gah! I mean, I know how you feel. And then Jopnik for 25 Beaver Bucks with their 3rd super chat says, this was delightful. Have my beer money for the weekend. Well, thank you very much. All right, so let's talk about what is coming up on this channel. So on Tuesday, we've got Kent with Bent coming up. Bent will not be in a tutu because he doesn't wear tutus if we hit the fancy avatar number on a day where I am not streaming with him. But he will be there, or at least that's the plan. That's Tuesday. That will be at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Then let me take a look on Thursday. Yep, Thursday. we have I'll Make My Own Dating Techniques with Blackjack and Hookers, which is the final part of the current series about Andrew Snelling lying about just all of geology, basically. Then on Saturday, I am hoping that Vishanti will be back, and we will be looking back at Pastor or Elder Pete Greer. I don't think he's technically the pastor. Although sometimes I call him a pastor. Whatever. I'm not going to kill myself over getting the organizational chart for that church wrong. I don't even go to that church. Let's see. Then on the next Tuesday, it'll be Kent with Bent again. And then on that Thursday, we're going to be doing Information and Kinds Will Never Be Defined, which is a rebroadcast of a chat I had with a creationist along with Jackson Wheat over on Chesh's channel. Now, for stuff that I'm doing but not on this channel, like I've been saying, go check out Chesh's channel. Any of my mods, please put her channel or the link to the Unnamed Tavern in the chat, if you would be so kind. Because I'm going to be doing that very soon after this. And then also on Fridays, on Top Hats Off, my other channel, we are doing Star Trek Adventures actual play sessions with a number of people who watch my channel. So that includes Zeralon, Tirirana, Czar, and Crusher, but also with some other YouTubers, including Jordan from Reason to Doubt, Chesh from Chesh, as well as Craig, FTFE, from FTFE. So we have a lot of fun. We've done 2 episodes so far. We're planning to do the 3rd episode this Friday. Those are at 5 p.m. Pacific. Was that 8 p.m. Eastern? And also, we do have to coordinate with the Europeans because the time change is going to be happening at on a different date for us North Americans versus the Europeans. Because we have 2 people in Europe and 1 person in Canada, and the rest of the people, I believe, are Americans. So it's a little complicated, but that's okay. And it looks like my Atkinson did just post Chesh's channel, so go over there, check that out, because I will be there soon. But with that being said, we went a little bit over time, but not by much. But you guys also got Bent that free pizza. I'm going to be recording that poem, which again will be public in December, but it will be up for early access for members earlier than that. And thank you so much, everybody. I hope you all have a wonderful, safe rest of your weekend, and I hope to see you in just a little bit on Chesh's channel. Bye! Before you go, I'd like to just take a second to thank my channel members and patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above. Benthoven, Felrevara, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Ellerhan Teller, Horseflesh, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostick Van Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabbity Babbity, Sphincter of Doom, Vollus, North Texas Fossils, John Ackerman, Strawberry Vein, and Dr. Tapioca Weasel. It's because of my channel members and patrons that I'm able to do this show as I am now with 3 videos a week. Without them, I would be reduced to maybe 1 a week, or maybe even 1 every other week. So, if you like this channel and you'd like to support, there's a link to the Patreon in the description, and a join button below this video. All channel members and patrons get early access to videos, often many months in advance, as well as access to my super secret Discord server that's just for supporters and is a great way to contact me. Thanks for watching.